Hello and welcome to today's episode. We will be discussing the year 2014 and what that brought to video games. Before we do that, though, we'll go over some games that I've selected here in Roulette of Gaming, and then we'll touch base on some modern gaming news. After that is when we will get into the main meat of it, again for 2014 for year in gaming. And it was a bit of a slower-ish year, I guess you could say. There's always great stuff that comes out each year, but it's definitely a year that I feel like wasn't one of the loudest years, I guess, in video games. Another thing, too, also, is that I'm starting to notice that there's a bit of a gap here in the mid-2010s or so that I have a bit of a as I was taking my notes, I'm like, oh, right, this happened, or this game came out, and this game came out. But it's not something that is like immediately in the forefront of my mind. And again, I think that has to do with, again, the year wasn't the most memorable. And at the same time, like I mentioned before, is where I didn't fall off of completely of video games, but I wasn't quite playing them as much. Although this was the year that I did get the PlayStation 4, though. But I do remember that there wasn't a whole lot to play on the PlayStation 4. And so I was just honestly playing like a lot of like remasters or still playing, I think, through my backlog of the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 at this time. But we'll get into what happened in 2014 for gaming here later on. But let's go ahead and go over for the games I've selected here for Roulette of Gaming. And this is a pretty diverse bunch of games here that I got. So let's go over these here. And let's see, as I started looking at this list here, pretty much all of these games, I have some experience with some of them, but not a whole lot though. So at the very least, it'll be fun capturing some. I say capturing, but really just recording, I guess, some videos for these. It was funny that I was having a conversation with my wife a little while ago, and I forgot what we were talking about, but I said something along the lines of like, "Hey, did you tape that episode?" or something like that. And I was like, "Wow, when was the last time I've even thought about that phrase to tape an episode?" And for you younger people out there, what that means is basically just when we wanted to record something, like if we wanted to watch a show later on, we would record it on a VCR, and you would put in a tape on there, right, like a cassette tape. And so it's just a phrase that was used, like, "Hey, can you tape me that episode?" or something like that. So that was my little nostalgic brain just kind of kicked in there, right? And my wife probably looks at me like, "Oh my God, you are ancient." Not super ancient, but getting up there. At least enough to know what did you record that tape, or did you tape that episode means, anyways. But anyways, let's get into here for these games. And so the first one is for Redout. This is a game, well, really a series, because there's a few entries in this series that I just found out about, honestly, not too long ago. And I think what lured me into it, I think I was browsing through the PlayStation store, and I found it for cheap one time, and it was on the, I have it on the PlayStation 5, but it originally came out on the PlayStation 4. And so it's, what caught my attention is that I'm always a sucker for like Wipeout style games if they're done really well. And because Wipeout just, unfortunately has been MIA. And so this game is pretty cool. I've only messed around with it a little bit, but I feel like I really need to get into it some more, because it's a little bit that I've played. It's definitely filling in that void that Wipeout left of just having like a really cool, futuristic hovercraft or sort of a racing game. And the graphics are pretty cool in it. The very futuristic settings on it are really cool. Runs at a smooth 60 frames per second. Has cool music. Has a lot of different like modes and all that you can do, like a career mode and all. And while it does have some DLC, from what I can tell, the main game, which isn't, like I said, I think I bought this game some years ago for really cheap. It shouldn't be too expensive either way. And yeah, everything I played of it seems really fun. So this is one that I definitely want to get into more. I've seen that there's like a Redout 2, so a sequel, and then also some kind of like a space shooter game based around the same series, from what I understand. So I would say that if you're into like fast-paced racing games that aren't like racing sims and all, obviously, this is definitely one that might catch your attention, especially if you were a big fan of Wipeout from back in the day. But next up is Street Fighter Cross Tekken. At least I think that's how you say it, because it's spelled so Street Fighter, and then it has an X, and then Tekken. So, and I think I've heard that that's how it's considered, right? Street Fighter Cross Tekken. So this game, I remember when it was announced, I was pretty excited about it because Street Fighter meets Tekken, only they're doing it more in the style of Street Fighter. I thought that was pretty exciting. I'm usually a fan of a lot of the Capcom sort of fighting game crossovers that they do. Everything from like Marvel versus Capcom and things like that. And so this one had me pretty excited. The graphics are so it plays more Street Fighter than Tekken. So I always thought that was going to be interesting on how they implemented that because one thing is when they did like Capcom versus SNK, because even though yes they play different, but they're still 2D fighters, right? Where Street Fighter and Tekken do play different, and ultimately I gotta commend it that they did a pretty good job. And the graphics and such are sort of in the art style of what Street Fighter 4 was doing. Only the outlines and all, because it has a very comic booky look. They're a little bit more bolden, so it even seems to be more of a comic booky look. But it looks great and it plays pretty good. Like I said, overall, it's as far as like the controls and all. I mean, the Capcom has this formula down. But I remember, and as I was recording some footage for this, I was thinking, I was like, I remember this game had a lot of controversy, and we actually talked about it, I think, a few episodes back, where it ultimately had to do with the game was a bit unbalanced, right? And because of the gem system that it has, that it can make some characters really overpowered, or give you the abilities to have be really overpowered, or something to that effect. And then also, this is kind of where a lot of like it already been started before, but like the whole issue with DLC, right? Where you get a game, the full content is on the game. It's just that to unlock it, you need to buy the DLC, and so that started seeming like really scummy business practices. And so this game here is an example of that. I didn't quite know it at the time. I think I was just kind of suckered into Street Fighter versus Tekken. Yeah, sure, that's awesome. Let's go. And it played pretty good. And again, I don't play games multiplayer really, so I was just playing it single player. So I guess I wasn't really I wasn't aware of like some of the issues that it had, and but ultimately, I mean, I really liked it. I still have it downloaded on my PlayStation 3, and I mean, again, if for the fighting game mechanics in it and all are pretty good, if you can overlook some of the overbalance or the basically the game is not very balanced very well. And then the issues with the DLC. The one that I got, I'm downloaded on my PlayStation 3. I don't remember how I bought it, or I don't think it was like, because there's a bunch of games that I have downloaded on my PlayStation 3 that were part of like, that they were, free as long as you had the PS Plus subscription. I don't know if it was a part of that. No, I don't think so. But as far as I can see, I think I got all the characters. So I don't know. Maybe I did buy all the characters back then. I have no idea. But ultimately, it's there, and I seem to have the full game. So I had a little bit of fun, capturing the footage for it. And when I was talking about it the other day, and yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's a pretty fun video game if you can get past the fact that it's not very balanced and that it has some controversy behind it. But still, was pretty cool though, right? To see, Ryu team up with Kazuya. That was pretty. I always have a fun time with that. Let's see, and next up is Viewpoint. So we're going more retro this time, and so Viewpoint, it is a isometric shooter that was on the Neo Geo. The Sega Genesis also got a port, which isn't half bad. A little bit that I've tried it, but the Neo Geo one was where it's at, and so this one though, I could be wrong, but I guess when I do a little bit of research, I'll figure it out. But let's see, because most games were developed by SNK, right? That were on the Neo Geo. This one, I believe, I think it was someone else. I could be wrong on that. I think Sammy had a hand in it, or maybe I'm thinking of the Genesis port. I'm not sure. But either way, though, it's an isometric view. So if you're kind of like going way back in the day, right? Like the very first Zagzone game on the arcades. So kind of similar to that, only well at the time just better graphics, and it has some polygonal 3D characters or enemies in it, which gives it a kind of at the time, right, a bit of a 3D look that is also helped by the isometric perspective. And it's a pretty difficult shooter. It's one where if you die, you go back to a checkpoint instead of just respawning, if I recall. And has some pretty cool power-ups and all. And so, yeah, very difficult game, though. But one of the things that made it stand out some, though, was that it has a really cool techno soundtrack to it. That's pretty catchy. Definitely sounds a lot better on the Neo Geo than the Sega Genesis one, from what I can recall. But It's a pretty cool game. I've played it before, and I've got a little. I think I've gotten like up to the third stage or so, but it's a fairly difficult game, and I just haven't really sat down and really tried to beat it. But it's yeah. I mean, I remember the game looked really cool in screenshots back in the day, and so afterwards, when I was finally able to play it through like emulation and such, it's been a pretty cool experience. Unfortunately, this game, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but I haven't really seen it for re-release anywhere. And again, because there's been a lot of Neo Geo games that have been re-released, but like I said, I think this one was developed by someone else, and so that's why I think maybe due to licensing and all, it hasn't been widely re-released again, as far as my understanding. But if you can track down a copy somehow to play, it's a pretty cool shooter if you're into those. But next up is Donkey Kong 2, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest. So I barely started this game a little while ago, and I haven't gone back to try to fully play through it. I know I got that habit of just picking up a game real quick and then just putting it away and say I'll come back to it. But I recently beat Donkey Kong Country, and so immediately after I beat that one, I tested this one out just to see what it's all about. And yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like a game that I'm going to like more than Donkey Kong Country. I just need to, like I said, right, get that hunker down and play it. But from what I understand, it has better level designs, more variety, better play mechanics overall. Just basically a more polished, better version of the first one. And so if that's the case, I'm sure that's something that I'll really be into playing. And so hopefully it just won't take me, over 30 years to beat it finally. But like the way the first one did. But yeah, it seems like a really interesting game. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think this might be the platform that I'll have, just as I'm playing off and on, right, between other games. But next up is The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. And this game I did have on the Game Boy Advance back in the day, and it's a top-down, excuse me, action RPG that was on the Game Boy Advance, and it plays pretty good. It's developed by Capcom, and I mean Capcom. So they did the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, and they've done a really good job with those. And so everything that I played of this one is very unique. And I remember I got a little ways into it when I had it back in the day on the Game Boy Advance. I don't know, maybe a few hours into it, but I enjoyed my time with it. Again, it's just one of those games that I started playing, and I was like, I'll play it later. And, 20 years, 30 years passed by or whatever. But definitely has my interest. It's a really well done game. And from what I understand, I could be wrong, but the Zelda timeline is all crazy. But I think this is technically one of the earlier ones as far as the timeline goes. Because I know it's Skyward Sword is the first one. That's sort of like the origin of all Zelda games. And then I think this one comes next. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I know it's fairly early in the timeline. The graphical style is kind of similar to something like the Wind Waker almost, only, with 2D sprites. But yeah, I mean, I would say if you like 2D Zelda games, you would definitely like this one. I can't see why you wouldn't like it. Yeah, it's the gimmick to it is that you can shrink, right? And so that's a pretty fun little mechanic there. And yeah, I would say definitely worth your time. It's definitely a fun little game. But next up, though, this is a bit of I guess, a hidden gem or not a very commonly known game. But that's Dragon Force 2. So, speaking of Dragon Force, anybody listen to Dragon Force, like the actual artist? That's a pretty cool rock band. I wonder if I remember I used to listen to them back in the day, and then they had that really hard song, Through the Fire and the Flames, on Guitar Hero, I think. But anyways, Dragon Force, not to be confused with the band, but Dragon Force on the Sega Saturn, which was a strategy RPG. And so the first one did come out here in the United States. Basically, there's a lot of I just, again, like I said, I'm not even familiar with the first one. Yeah, I just know in the first one there's like a lot of like cinema or like cutscenes and all that you go through, or dialogue scenes that you go through, right? And all, then ultimately you get on a map to try to fight a battle, and then eventually when the battles play out, what it was really known for was that these battles the screen was just filled with a bunch of sprites. Definitely a game, from what I've seen, that showcases the power of the Sega Saturn. So I've always had an interest in playing this game. One day I remember I sat down and I tried to play it on the the Sega Saturn version, again the first one, and I couldn't figure it out, like as far as how to and granted I was just kind of trying to speed through the dialogue, because I was like, okay, I just want to get into a battle, I want to see what it's all about, which is probably the wrong thing to do because it is a game that you have to sort of pay attention to what they're telling you and all. And then granted, when I try to play it, I remember I was kind of tired, and I was just, again, sometimes when I try to play a game, it's like, okay, I got like 30 minutes to play or an hour to play. But then before you know, 5 or 10 minutes into the game, I'm like dozing off. And that's what I tried to do that one time. So not the right headspace to try to play a game like this. And so ultimately, I couldn't get into the battles, right, which is what I really wanted to see. But eventually, when you do, like I said, right, there's tons of these sprites on screen, and they're all duking it out, and all it looks visually very impressive. Definitely the Saturn flexing its 2D powerhouse muscle. But anyway, that's the first one. The second one, from my understanding, is more or less the same. Only the first one was published in the United States by Working Designs, where the second one wasn't. It didn't come out here in the United States. So one of those Saturn games that just stayed exclusive to Japan. And so again, if you are exploring the library of the Sega Saturn, however you're doing that, right, definitely would recommend checking out games from Japan too, because there's a lot of cool stuff there. And the other cool thing though is that thanks to a lot of like fans and modders and all, that they've translated this game to English. And so you can play the game in English now, right? If you are inclined to figure out how to do that. And so, yeah, I'll be interested in checking what this game's all about. Again, from my understanding, it's more the similar structure as the first one. So I don't know how far I'll get into it as far as trying to show off some of the more impressive stuff of the game. But from my understanding, again, as far as like the general consensus goes, it seems that the first one is really well beloved. The second one, maybe not as much, but it's still supposedly pretty good. So, and again, the fact that it was translated by a lot of fans, that's pretty cool. I mean, games like Grandia, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and the Shining Force Scenario 2 and 3, all that were on the Saturn as well, too, were fan translated, thanks to them, right, and all that, we're able to experience the game in English. So, definitely kudos to them, whoever that community is there. That's pretty awesome. And the last game that I'll talk about here is a game on the Sega Genesis that was for Monster World 4. And this game I've always wanted to play. It seems to be a bit of a adventure, almost Metroidvania style game, and you control a character, Asha, who probably, because these games were considered like the Wonder Boy games, but Asha, I think that's her name anyways. This time you play a girl, so maybe why they didn't use the name Wonder Boy in it. But Monster World 4, it seems like, again, a bit of an adventure Metroidvania game, really colorful graphics. And at the time, I remember too, for the Genesis, I don't believe this one came out in the States, because I recall reading in the magazines back then that this game was looked really good, graphically really impressive for the Genesis, played really well, but just wasn't getting a release over here. But now, in the years since, right, it's had some re-releases here in the United States, just various compilations and whatnot. So definitely a game I want to check out. I've Like I said, I booted it up a handful of times just to check it out, and it definitely seems interesting. So I'll be interested in, again, quote unquote, capturing footage for it. But that's what I got for the games that were in Roulette of Gaming. So hopefully that gave you a bit of more games that you perhaps might want to add to your backlog to try out some. Or if you have any feedback on them, would definitely be interested in knowing more about these games here. Let's get into it here with some modern gaming news. And I wasn't able to keep up with too much with the news that came out this week. The week just got away from me. Before I knew it, I was like, oh crap, it's already Friday. And so Friday's usually the day that I start recording my podcast here and, this segment. And I just wasn't able to catch up with a whole lot of information on it. But I did jot down a few things, right? So it's not completely void of any information. And then figured we'd have a discussion about a little something. But let's go ahead and get into some modern gaming stuff. But so before I actually get into the news, it was funny because I didn't even know that. If you've ever played a Cruisin' Blast on the Nintendo Switch, it's a cool racing game. It's from the Cruisin' series. So if you remember back in the day, it was Cruisin' USA, and then Cruisin' World, and then Cruisin' Blast. I think those are the three main games in that series. But they're very arcade-like racing games. Excuse me. The Cruisin' Blast game, I got introduced to the game by Chuck E. Cheese, where they had the game there, and there was a stretch there where we were taking our daughters there every so often. And so the little song that plays, cruising, come on and cruise it. Anyways, that song I thought was kind of catchy. The game was really fun, and I saw it for cheap one time on the Switch. I was like, oh, screw it, I'll go ahead and get it. And it is, it's a lot of fun to play that game. And what I like about it too is that it's a pretty complete game. I mean, there's a lot of like, levels in it and modes and all, which is kind of unheard of nowadays. So yeah, definitely. If you've never played it, you like arcade racing style games, highly recommend it. Well, anyways, my daughters have been playing it, and they unlocked these unicorns. And so, well, it was just the other day. I was just there hanging around with them, and so they started playing Cruising Blast, and they got my two daughters, they got my wife to play, and so apparently somehow they unlocked these unicorns, and which is actually kind of funny seeing them ride around in the unicorns as when they do like the nitro blast, they get like this, looks like almost like they're farting out like this nitro blast out of their butts, and anyway, it was kind of funny watching them play. And apparently, according to them, it's a whole different experience. So if you've never unlocked the unicorns in Cruise and Blast, sounds like it'll truly transform the game and bring all your unicorn fantasies come true. Actually, I don't know if that even sounds right, but anyways, they seem like they were having a lot of fun, so definitely seems pretty cool. And so, speaking of fun and I guess silly stuff. Um, so April Fool's Day was a thing, obviously, right? A few days ago. I like April Fool's Day. It's I usually like tried doing a little prank on my kids and then on my wife. I wasn't able to really think of anything too crazy this year, so all I did was I printed out like remember back in the day the troll face meme where it has it's like a white face and with black outlines, and it has like this really, it looks kind of creepy with this really sly grin. Anyway, I printed some of those out and then just taped it on some of our pictures that we have of the wall of ourselves. Um, it's all I had this year. I couldn't think of anything. My wife, I think, just kind of rolled her eyes at me, but that's all I had. But I do like this holiday, though, and well, I guess if you call it a holiday, just for a lot of the little pranks that get done around, right? And also for like some of the just movies and video games and news. I like that kind of stuff. I think it's funny. I just always have to remind myself, though, right, that yes, it is April Fool's Day, right? So, because I got fooled. So, one video that I saw, it was the Sony PlayStation one about the co-pilot being in video games. That one was kind of funny. It was a pretty well done commercial where this dude sits down and so he's talking to his controller. He's like, "Okay, do this," and I was like, "Okay, yep, sure, I'll take on this boss for you," and it shows like the boss getting eliminated, right? And then it ends up like ordering pizza and all that. And then at one point, he's like, the controller's talking back to him saying like, "These nuts." So it was a pretty well done commercial. I thought it was pretty funny, right? I was like, okay, that's funny. Sometime later in the day, though, and like I said, I wasn't even thinking about it. And the funny thing is that so again, as I'm going through the news throughout the week, right, I just make like quick little notes on my Notepad app that I have on my phone. And I just jot it down right as something to discuss to some extent, right, as I'm doing my segment here. And so there was something that I saw from Sega that they unveiled their new logo, which is 3% more blue. And I was like, what? I was like, that's odd. And so I was looking at the logo and I was like, I was like really squinting my eyes, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "I can't really see how it's more blue." I was like, "Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe they're trying to bolden it a little bit more." I was like, I don't know. I can't tell the difference." But anyway, so I made the note on my app here, right? So, to discuss it and maybe try to, you know, go more of a deep dive into it. But it wasn't. Luckily, I caught it again yesterday. I was going through some of the or another article on that, and then in the comment section, I was like, "Yeah, that was a fun prank." I was like, "Oh Jesus Christ, that was a damn April Fool's Day joke." Because literally, I spent like almost 5 minutes looking at this damn logo, right, trying to see like where in the hell is it more blue at. So yeah, good job, me. So I got punked, but that was kind of but so following up on a little bit of a story that I started last week, and so for that Legacy of Kane Ascendance game, and I was keeping my eye on it just to see if it would get decent reviews because I'm all about trying to get this Legacy of Kane series going again. And so again, if you're tuning in just barely now, it's like a 2D game, and I wasn't quite sure if it's going to be more action oriented or what kind of. But it was like it has like a pixel art style, and so the reviews did come out, and and again, ultimately, some people it doesn't seem like it's a horrible game, but from what it seems like, it's definitely more action oriented from what it sounds like, right? So not like a Metroidvania too much, but from what it sounds like. The gameplay is okay. It's not bad. Nothing too crazy. But seems they seem to really emphasize on the story though. However, the story though, it seems to be, from what I understand, and I haven't gone this deep into like the Legacy of Kain lore outside of just the video games, but it seems like there was some kind of a graphic novel that came out that wasn't actually written by Amy Henning. So Amy Henning is the main writer of the original Legacy of Kain games, and she's amazing. She's a really great writer, and I would wish we would see more of her work. I think she's working on that Battle for Hydra game for with Captain America and Black Panther. I don't know. I think I heard that. But she's also done like the first few Uncharted games, and so she's always been one of my favorite writers as far as like video games go. And so her work on the vampire, like the Legacy of Kain games, reminded me a lot, like the way she writes and all that, kind of like similar to Anne Rice, who I'm a big fan of, rest in peace, of like the books that she did in the Vampire Chronicles. I just think those books right there and the lore that she gives it, the way she like poetically describes these vampires. And I just fell in love with all of that, right? Anne Rice, rest in peace, she was an amazing writer. And Amy Henning has somewhat of her similar style. And so I really enjoyed like the story and the script of like these Legacy of Kain games. Well, anyways, it seems like the this game is kind of based around this some kind of a graphic novel that came out that wasn't written by her, and it kind of came across as like fan fiction, from what I understand. And this is something that's been pretty publicly known, right? So I don't think it's so much of a spoiler, but there's like some kind of a character, it's like some kind of vampiress that's in this game that seems to be a sister of Raziel, and she's been behind a lot of the plot of the previous games. So the game is sort of like a retelling of like the events, only with her influence in it. And that seems, from what I've been reading, seems to be rubbing people the wrong way, as it seems like her character was sort of shoehorned in. It kind of makes the like almost like trying to retcon the events of what happened in the previous games to some extent. So I don't know. That kind of turned me off actually on it, and uh, I don't know. Maybe if I see it for super cheap one day, I might pick it up, but not something that after reading some reviews on it, I was like, I think I'll hold off on this one. But if you're a Legacy of Kain fan, you've been interested in this, maybe check out some reviews first before you jump in and buy them. But speaking of reviews, so the Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario Galaxy movie seems like that's been some a topic for debate. It seems. I mean, it kind of seems to be like the first one where it was like not very. It wasn't received critically that well. So I'm actually trying to look it up right now where it stands on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, again, ultimately, you make your own opinion on whether if it's video games or movies and all right. This just kind of gives you an idea of what the overall consensus is as far as like critics versus fans and all. So, for example, okay, so right now, as of right now, so this is when I'm recording this segment here. Again, I won't actually post this until Sunday, but on April 5th, but right now it's April 3rd in the morning at around 6:57. The Rotten Tomato score for Super Mario Galaxy movie is 41% with 143 reviews. So it seems like it's more or less going to sit there. But the popcorn meter is at 90%. So kind of the same of what it was with the Super Mario Brothers movie. And what it seems like from what I've been reading the reviews, I don't know, because I'm a bit of a movie buff too also, so I follow some of that news as well too, is that it's kind of more or less the same. Now the first one was a little bit better received. So the first one, I'm looking it up right now, so it was 59% on the tomato meter, which is still considered rotten, but a little bit better I guess on the second one, and then 95% on the popcorn meter. But more or less the same, right? Where it sounds like the movie is stuffed with a lot of things, right? Like I mean, that's one thing I kept hearing, is that there's a lot going on screen, right? Where it's almost hard to keep up with everything because there's so many like Easter eggs and all, and it has a zany, crazy animation and action and all, right, and all, and it definitely seems to be made for the younger generation, which makes sense, obviously, right? Mario is more for kids, right? But what I mean by that also is that generation that just has a very short attention span, and so I think for some older people, probably where the critics and all were panning the second one even more so than the first, is that it just seems like a little too much, right? Like one of the lowest rated reviews said something about like I'd rather stick himself with pin needles or something like that than watch this movie again. I was like, damn. But again, it seems like a lot of the audience so likes it. So I mean, I'm gonna kind of take it like it's a fun movie to watch. If you don't go into it thinking like it's like the next great, Toy Story or something like that, right? Something that is truly revolutionary for animation. But if anything, it looks pretty amazing. I mean, the color usage and all of it looks really well done. And um, yeah, I mean, I'll definitely look to get it when it comes out to rent. Uh, but yeah, I mean, again, I don't know. I guess what people were expecting with this movie, right? My thing is, I mean, if you're gonna, obviously it's a movie based on a known project, right? So you want it to have certain Easter eggs and all, and as long as the story makes sense, right? Obviously, it doesn't have to be Oscar worthy or whatever. As long as it makes sense, it gets you from point A to point B in a way where you're like, oh, okay, I understood what happens, and it's not completely horrible. Then and then you get all the cool animations and all that, then okay, I think that's a good time, right? But I guess I have to watch it, right? Because I was watching some of my more trusted movie reviewers, and yeah, they didn't think too highly of it either. So, but either way, I'll check it out though, and at the very least, I think my kids will get an enjoyment out of it for at least the one time that they watch it. But yeah, just a heads up if you were wanting to go watch the movie that you know it's a bit divisive as for divisive, however you say that, amongst people. But I think it'll still be cool though to see Fox McCloud in it, especially voiced by Glenn Powell. I think that's a good fit right there, and so that's one thing that I actually did hear from pretty much across the board that his performance was pretty well done in it. Hmm. Speaking of Star Fox, now that I'm thinking about it, I did hear this. So these are just rumors again, right? And we're gonna get more into the rumor mill a little bit later, but it seems like there's a rumor, and again, take this with a grain of salt because this didn't specifically come from Nate the Hate, but somebody else. But it was kind of like attaching themselves to Nate the Hate's rumors that we talked about last week. But that there's not only a Star Fox game coming out in the vein of like the older Star Fox games, like the shooting old school games, like think Star Fox or Star Fox 64, but also another Star Fox game around the lines of like what Sonic, or I'm sorry, Star Fox Adventure, excuse me, Star Fox Adventure was. Just a rumor going around, so I don't know how much stock I'd put into that there, but that is something that supposedly people are saying. So, but switching gears though, and hey, that's a pretty good little segue into this next story because Xbox announced that they're going to have a games showcase on the 7th of June of 2026 and a Gears of War E-Day showcase immediately following the game showcase. So basically, they're going to show off a bunch of games of some sort in their showcase that they're having, and then immediately after that, they're going to have one specifically made for Gears of War E-Day. And so I've been kind of curious about that game because I was like, I don't know if it's coming out this year, but I was like, I think it's right around the corner, and they haven't really talked too much about it. So yeah, so that'll be cool. And so that's still a little ways away, but that's happening on the 7th of June of 2026. I mean, I haven't been keeping up too much with Xbox news. Just I see a headline here and there, and I mean, it seems like they're making a lot of moves. Maybe the Sasha CEO, maybe she's doing the right moves. Who knows, right? I know she immediately got panned a lot from her background in having a background in AI, and then some of the weird like conversation she was or wasn't having with the community, right? That whole thing. But I don't know, I mean, maybe she's making some right moves. Maybe that's what it took, right? Just somebody to completely fresh to come in and change things around. I mean, we'll see, right? We've talked about the Project Helix before and all, and seems interesting, but I don't know. I think Xbox right now they sort of have like a clean slate to try anything because right now they're just kind of like expected to lose, right? And so it's like, fuck it, just try this, see what happens, and at the very least, right, and all some fresh ideas. So we'll see what comes out of Xbox, but we probably won't know, like I guess the extent of what all that will be until sometime later. The only thing that I can think of that's Xbox related, I mean, not so much exclusives anymore, but that's Xbox related is, well, really from their main pillars, right? The new Halo, campaign evolved remake of the first game. I'm interested in that, right? I mean, I really enjoyed that game, so we'll see how that remake turns out. Um, Gears of War E-Day, I mean, let's see what this is all about, right? I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of Part 4 and 5, but maybe this new game can bring the series back. And Forza Horizon 6, right now that it's in Japan, I'm definitely curious to check that out. And also Fable to an extent. I guess we'll see what that game's all about too. Also, so there's some excitement there, even though they're not necessarily exclusives anymore. But it's still like Xbox-like games, I guess, if that makes any sense. So we'll see what comes out of that. Mm. Another story that I wrote the headline down for this, but I just didn't have the time to really do more of a deep dive into it. But looks like Nintendo took a bit of an L in the Pal World case. So I haven't been following that too much, but my understanding is that so this Pal World game that I think came out, was it last year that it came out or 2 years ago now? Geez, I don't remember. But ultimately, it was kind of it had some similarities to Pokemon, but with guns. So, and it was a pretty big hit with a lot of people. I think it's still a pretty big hit too, also, right? And people were playing this game a lot, and so Nintendo got a little offended by that, and so decided to sue. Now, what I understand of it, and again, might get some of my facts wrong here, but you know, I mean, the game has some inspiration from Pokemon. So, I mean, I guess you could go after them for that. I don't know, like, to what extent. I haven't really checked out this Power World game. So that's one thing that they could perhaps go after them on. But it seems like more like what they did go after them on, though, was for like patent infringement. So Nintendo had patented the idea of like capturing an enemy in a ball to use them as a weapon, right? Something to that effect, which is very much a Pokemon idea. But it's not just Pokemon that does it. I mean, there was what Dragon Quest V did it before Pokemon, and I've heard even the Shin Megami Tensei series had done it way before that too. And there's other games that have done a similar mechanic to that. So that was a controversy back then, was if Nintendo's copywriting this stuff, then that seems to be not fair, basically, because it's a gameplay mechanic, right? That shouldn't be patent in itself, where like, what are you going to do next? Patent like platforming, so there was some controversy behind that. From what it sounds like, and again, it seems like ultimately Nintendo, I don't think they lost completely, but I think that they're reviewing everything again. So Nintendo may not come out winning on this one. Again, that's my very basic understanding of it, and I might get some of my information wrong. But if anything, I think it's a win though for um, companies trying to patent ideas, right? It just seems like, I mean, I get it. It's very competitive out there now, but at the same time, it really limits creativity though and all. And I mean, like if you usher in a gameplay mechanic, that's great. Like for example, the first person that invented a platformer, but let's just say if Nintendo had patent platforming, then we would have only had Mario games, nothing like some of the cool other platformers that came out, like Sonic, Rocket Knight Adventures, yeah, I don't know, even Mega Man, or so a bunch of other platforming games that have come out in the years since, right? And that's my understanding of it, what happened. So I'll try to follow up on the story a little bit more and maybe provide some more information as this plays out. But yeah, I mean, like the other one that was a bit upsetting was that Warner Brothers games, or I think that's what they're called, they patented the Nemesis system, which was used in Middle Earth: Shadow of Mordor, which is a really cool system where basically it's you, like, if you kill an orc, it comes back stronger, or if it kills you, but then if you go back and kill it, you get stronger, something to that effect, right? And all. It's been a while since I played that game, but I remember when I played it, I thought it was really cool. I was like, oh, this is actually this is very inventive. It's very original, and it's a very fresh idea in an open world setting. And the fact that they patented it though, and they haven't really done anything with it, is kind of the frustrating part, right? So that's kind of what that all involves there. So yeah, at the very least, looks like there's a bit of a stall to that. So sorry, Nintendo, you can't win them all, man. It's like, come on, guys. It's like, I like Nintendo, but then some of their practices are very scummy too. So I don't know. Nintendo's an interesting company, I guess, to put it lightly. So here's a thing that I read here also. So there was the Last of Us game, the Last of Us Online game that was going to come out, but it was canceled. I think that was sometime last year where they made an announcement on that. But there was a bit more information that came out on this. And so basically, the Last of Us Online director reveals that Naughty Dog had to choose between canceling the 80% completed game and Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. And so a quote from the director: "It was soul crushing to find out it was getting canceled 24 hours before it was announced publicly." So, yikes. Mm. Last of Us Online. I mean, I like the first Last of Us game. The second one, I like it, but it's a bit controversial. But I definitely like it more than I don't like it. But a Last of Us Online game, it's not something again that I would have been interested in. Just again, I'm just not interested in online games. But I think it would have been interesting though if it had come out and at the very least bolster that franchise more. As I didn't think I needed a Last of Us Part Two, but it happened. I mean, it happened, and what happened happened also. Given all the controversy behind that game, but given where it's at now, and that Last of Us Part Two does exist, um, I feel like it needs a Part Three. Like there needs to be some kind of a Part Three to it. And just because where they left it all off at, again, I probably would have been happier had they not even done a Part Two. But the fact that it exists, and I was like, let's maybe do a Part Three and see if we can sort of, I don't know, bring it back home. I guess somehow. I don't know how, but just somehow. So my thought was like maybe if they make a Last of Us Online, that'll bolster the series more, and eventually it'll lead to a Last of Us Part Three. Now there were rumors that a Part Three was going to come out. Last I knew, Neil Druckmann had come out saying that he's pretty much done with it. Like, no, as far as like he's not doing it. That's the last that I know of it. So, but I don't know if there's been any further rumors that have come out from that. Uh, but either way, though, looks like The Last of Us Online was canceled, and yeah, I mean that's kind of that. The way it went about it, it seemed like it kind of sucks because we're doing this Heretic Prophecy game, which I don't know. Is anybody interested in that game? I don't know, something about it that just doesn't really spark my interest in it. I don't know. Maybe it could be cool. I mean, I'm not gonna count out Naughty Dog because they have a lot of creative talent there, but we'll see. But the other thing, like we've discussed before, right? A lot of these companies, though, like companies that would make really great games back then, it's a lot of them are brand new teams, right? And so they're not necessarily the company of old that you knew before, right? So that's why I'm not putting too much stock into that game. But I guess we'll see whenever they decide to announce more of it. But not something I'm too terribly excited for. But let's see. Another thing that I saw here recently too, so they were talking about like a Sony PlayStation 6 handheld. Well, rumors, I should say. So emphasis on rumors. These are just rumors coming out. I didn't see where the rumors were coming from, but they're rumors. So again, take it with, a lot of skepticism. But supposedly, if the rumors are to be believed, is that the PlayStation 6 handheld is, as far as its power goes, it's said to be more powerful than the Xbox Series S. So, I mean, that's more or less in line with the slightly more powerful than what like the Switch 2 is. Because I put the Switch 2, and again, I'm not the most techie person and all, but when I'm playing games on the Switch 2, you know, uh, I put it somewhere between like the PlayStation 4 through the Xbox Series S, right? Within that range right there. Um, and so this is a little bit more powerful than that. Then I mean, it sounds like it's got some power on the hood, right? But I guess we'll see how that all works. Is it somehow a hybrid with the PlayStation 6 or whatever that's going to be? And that's about as much as I know on that. Like I said, a little bit that I followed on that story, but there is some excitement to the next generation if they somehow figure out ways to make them hybrid somehow, right? I mean, I think that that's where the Switch has really captured a lot of gamers there because it is really convenient to play games that way. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. As you get older, and you're busy, have kids and all, it's just so much easier to play games that way, where you have some kind of a hybrid option. And so maybe that's where a lot of these companies are heading in that direction there to some extent. But we'll see more how that all plays out. But that's supposedly the rumor is that it'll be a powerful little device, right? If that ends up being the case. So again, not more powerful than the Xbox Series X, more powerful than the Xbox Series S. And what's funny is that that's the Xbox system I've been using more of, where because that's what I mainly use for emulation, right? Having I'll stress this again, right? I think I've said it a few times, but if you want to get into emulation and you want like a very convenient form factor, right, to play games on, if you don't mind it being like plugged into the TV, the Xbox Series S and getting the development kit on it, absolutely a good way to go. I mean, it'll play pretty much flawlessly games all the way up to the Dreamcast, um, the PlayStation 2, and the GameCube. It can play them. Some games hit and miss here and there a little bit, right? I have little glitches here and there, but for the most part, a lot of the games play really excellent on it as well, too. So, yeah, if you're looking for something to play, again, everything up to like the Dreamcast pretty much flawlessly, with a majority of like the PlayStation 2 and GameCube games, it's a great system for that. You have to pay $20 to get into the development kit thing, but it's a one-time fee, and then after that you're set, right? As far as how to get it all set up, it is a little bit complicated. There's tons of channels out there that'll help you through that. Though there's one dude, he has a bunch of emulation stuff for the not only for the Xbox Series S, but for a lot of the stuff. The guy's name is like Arcalades or something like that. I forgot this channel's name, but he's really excellent as far as giving you tutorials for how to do all this stuff. Breaks it down step by step, So if you're not super techie, and if I was able to figure it out right and all, I'm sure you can too with his instructions there. And I forgot the dude's name, but if you Google like Xbox Series S emulation, I'm sure his videos tend to be one of the more popular ones that pop up. So, but yeah, that'll be interesting though. But let's kind of talk a little bit about remakes and remasters and rumors and things like that. Because what prompted this little conversation here was some information that came out from Nate the Hate, which is kind of a bummer, but then wanted to add a bit more to that conversation about remakes and remasters. So the rumor was, or according to what Nate the Hates heard, is that Final Fantasy IX, so the remake, right? Is it coming out? Is it not coming out? And we talked about this before. I think the last update that I gave some weeks ago, but that it seems more definitively that Final Fantasy IX is on ice. Excuse me, on ice. If you heard that before I burp, excuse me. But I think that's the last update that I gave on it right now, but this seems to be more cementing that fact that it's almost like a fact now, right? That it's just not moving anywhere now. So, but it means that they could revisit it. It's just that that's the last thing, is that it's just a nice. So I would say I wouldn't get my hopes up for a Final Fantasy IX remake, considering the track record that this Nate the Hate dude has, right? So I've been kind of holding off on trying to play the game, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna play the Final Fantasy IX on my Steam Deck with the Magori mod, Magori Mori mod or something like that it's called, where it really cleans up the graphics, gives you a lot of cool quality of life improvements on it. And they're still working on the voice mods, which again, we did a little stint on that a few weeks back. But I would say that'd probably be the best way to play the game now, just, because again, I wouldn't put my stock in a Final Fantasy IX remake. I mean, if it happens, great, but, seems like it's on ice. So, it's, it's frozen. It's John Spartan right now. Anybody get that reference? Um, but speaking of remakes and rumors, though, so I've talked about these before, but I was just kind of thinking about it, right? And what kind of gets me excited, though, is that apparently. So uh, uh, let me back up a little bit. Nintendo apparently is losing their shit over these last leaks, right, that have come out, where basically Nate the Hate came out saying that The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Star Fox, and are coming out, and then pretty much gave a good chunk of the lineup of Switch 2 games that are coming out this year, and then also that the new 3D Mario game isn't coming out until next year. That's a lot of information. That wasn't just like one game leak. That was like the whole damn roadmap of what Nintendo has planned, right? So they're pretty upset about that because Nintendo, they're a video game company, right? They don't really have like anything else outside of just video games. I mean, they've been dabbling in movies and things like that, but for the most part, they're a video game company, and so it's for that information to get out there, that must be pretty damaging to their overall marketing, right? So the rumor is that they're pretty upset about it, right? That these leaks are getting out, and to the extent of what these leaks are, and so it seems like my thought, so that's what I wanted to kind of get a little bit into about it, right? As far as like leaks, also, right? Because like, what is the opinion on leaks? For me personally, as an individual, for me, leaks, I don't mind them just because I don't know. I guess I only, I don't like nowadays, because my life is so busy, right? Where it's not, like when I was single and all, where, a lot of my free time and all I spent on my hobbies and things like that, that I could see it maybe affecting me more that way. But now, because, I have more limited time and all, and if I get a, you know, like a little nugget of information, right? It's like, oh, okay, cool, right? That's, maybe this will happen, maybe not, right? I don't dwell on it too much though, because I know that, again, first of all, that's dumb, and second of all, because they just probably don't pan out, right, the way the rumors are suggesting. So me personally, I don't mind the leaks, right? I could take them or leave them, as far as like I'm not going to get too wound up about if it pans out or not, right? If anything, it's just kind of like fun to speculate, and I just kind of look at it like that. However, though, I mean, I can see how that can be pretty damaging, though, right? So I talked shit a little bit about Nintendo, right, taking the L on the whole Pal World thing. In their somewhat defense, right, I can understand how damaging this could be, because again, they are just a video game company, and so to have lost that element of surprise, where like, let's just say, like, if tomorrow I didn't know about it, all of a sudden they drop like a trailer for the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake officially from them, I would lose my shit, right? Like, what the fuck? A Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time remake? Let's go, especially if it's done really well. But now, the rumor's out there. It seems to be a really credible rumor. And so I'm like excited about it, but I have no frame of reference as far as like what this game's going to be all about. And so it's already putting preconceived notions in my head as far as what it's going to be about. So when the reveal eventually comes out, that might be diminished some. Well, I would say it would be diminished, right? Because I just, because I already know that it exists, right? And I've already started to formulate certain speculations about it in my head. And so whatever it comes out to be, I mean, I'm like I said, I can separate my own wishes for what the actual product is going to be, right? I can do that, it's not a problem. But I can understand that for a lot of people that would be very frustrating, right? And also for Nintendo too, because it's like they don't get to decide how the public is going to perceive this announcement, because everyone already knows about it, right? That it's coming out. It's like, okay, we know it's out there. Just show us what it is, and if it's anything different than what I thought it was going to be, it might form a very critical, a bad reception of the game, right? However, it turns out to be. Where otherwise, if it would have been just a complete surprise, maybe that we wouldn't have had such a bias towards it. What we thought it was going to be, right? If that makes any sense. So I can see how that's frustrating. And so again, to someone Nintendo's credit, I can understand that, because again, that's all they do is video games, right? So I would imagine that they would want to depend on a lot of that surprise there. Uh, uh, but if anything, though, for me personally, it is kind of exciting too, because if Nintendo's upset about it, right? Given Nate the Hate's track record, it sounds like this is legit. Like, it sounds like it's 99% legit. I'll say that this exists. So that has me very excited, right? And so I'm going to keep a very open mind on what they choose to do with this here. And but yeah, but that's, it's a big deal, right? With these leaks coming out, and not just with video games, but just across the board, right? With a lot of different hardware and all. Do you like leaks? Do you not like leaks? Is it frustrating when they come out, or do you just savor in all those speculations and rumors that come out? Um, I mean, like I said, right, for me personally, I don't mind. I kind of like him, actually. Again, knowing that I can separate, right, that it's just rumors, and then eventually what doesn't get unveiled or not unveiled, right? However it goes about. But I can see how it can be frustrating for a lot of people there. So, because again, it does kind of kill the surprise. And, I mean, like, there's been a handful of times where I've been surprised recently, and it was cool, right? It's like, what was a more recent time? Uh, let's see, like the God of War trilogy, and that was somewhat recent. I don't think I really, I mean, there had really been rumors about it, but not anything that was credible. Uh, I forgot. I can't think of another one, but it is cool, right? Still to be surprised. But, like I said, I personally, I don't really care, but I can see how that can be damaging for the company. But at the same time, also for fans too, also that want to be surprised still, right? We still want to have a sense of like, um, being shocked at something, right? But like in a good way, that, oh my God, I can't believe that exists, right? We don't get a whole lot of those moments anymore as adults. So it would be kind of cool. It is kind of cool when it happens. But either way, it's kind of one of those things where I don't, it's not that we shouldn't fight back or anything, but I've kind of accepted the fact that we just live in an era of social media and all, and this stuff is just out there, right? I mean, if you really want to avoid all that stuff, just stay off the internet. I mean, really, that's really all you can do. That's as far as I can see, right? But yeah, I mean that it's pretty exciting, right? Because it sounds like it's legitimate, right? It sounds like we are getting a Legend of Zelda remake, and that to me enough is exciting in its own right there. That's awesome. But one thing that maybe doesn't have me quite as excited, or I'm a little indifferent to it, I guess. But it's adding on to that Legend of Zelda remake rumor is so again, this didn't come specifically from Nate the Hate, but some other people though, my understanding anyways. But the rumor is that this Legend of Zelda remake that has a big budget behind it, and so meaning that they're really trying to do something with it, emphasizes on the remake part of it, right? Not so much a remaster. And so are they going to just make the original game with a few new additions and make it prettier, or are they really going to try to change up the whole game, right? And the speculation is that it's going to be influenced by Breath of the Wild. I kind of have a hard time imagining how that would be outside of like the graphical style, I guess. But like, if it's also like the gameplay style, I mean, I guess they could expand more on Hyrule, right? Because the original one did have its main hub, right, Hyrule Field, and it was, I mean, at the time it was pretty big, so maybe they could expand more on that and add more stuff in between. That would be kind of cool, I guess. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm going to keep an open mind to it, but that's the rumor right now that it's in some way, shape, or form. Again, it's not really known how, but it's going to take inspiration from Breath of the Wild. And I don't know. I'm a bit indifferent on that. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. But I'm going to keep an open mind. If it's Nintendo and they're putting a big budget behind it, and it sounds like they're putting a lot of care into it, because I mean they were pretty pissed off that that leak got out, right? So my thought is that this is like one of their babies, right? That they really want to take care of. I'm gonna keep an open mind and see what it's all about, right? But I don't know. I kind of wanted just the Ocarina of Time, just prettier graphics and a few quality of life improvements and all. But at the same time, if it's just that, then why go through all the trouble, right, of remaking it? So, like I said, I'm going to keep an open mind. I'll just leave it at that. I'm going to keep an open mind on whatever they choose to do with it. But and the other thing I was thinking of too is so within this year and possibly next year, right, we could be getting four of some of my favorite games of all time. Oh no, wait, I'm sorry, three of some of my favorite games of all time remade. And that is so again, it sounds like we're not getting Final Fantasy 9. I mean, we may, but again, I wouldn't put too much stock into it unless some new information comes out. But it sounds like because what's almost confirmed is the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake, which seems to be coming out holiday this year. If you go back a few episodes, the Chrono Trigger remake, that seems to be pretty much confirmed too. Also, again, nothing's been officially announced. All of these are just speculations, but the rumor mill is very high on these. And then also the Super Metroid remake of some sort. A little bit more information on that one too that was coming out was that it's speculated to be some kind of like a pixel. It's still going to retain some kind of form of pixel art. Again, to what extent that's going to be, we don't know. Because previously it was talked about that maybe Mercury Steam might be doing it, but we don't know, right? But that's the next kind of rumor. And again, that's just a rumor. But it seems like again, right, from a lot of rumors that are out there that it does exist. There's going to be some kind of Super Metroid remake. And so if all of those three pan out, that's going to be really exciting, right? Because again, those are some of my three favorite games of all time, and that'll be pretty exciting, right? And so again, kind of going into remakes and remasters and all, I know that sometimes, and I've even been critical of like, that sometimes we're getting too much of it. But as I start getting older and I think about it a little bit more, I don't mind them too much, just because, like I said, I'm just getting of that age where I've kind of cut off on some of the things that I'm really interested in as far as like continuing up with the hobby. So like it's kind of the same with movies and music and all, where I don't really listen to a whole lot of new music. And it's not that I wouldn't be interested in listening to new music. It's just that I'm just sort of starting to get more set in my ways and kind of listening to the stuff that I used to listen to. Kind of the same thing with games and movies. And it's not like I said, I can't appreciate something new. It's just your life just gets so busy that it's just kind of hard to like keep track of the latest and greatest. But if you're giving me a remaster of something that I really love from back in the day, I'm not going to hate that. I'm actually going to probably love it a lot. I mean, the game that I'm most looking forward to is Final Fantasy VII Part 3 Remake, whatever they choose to call it. and now the Legend of Zelda remake, and then the Chrono Trigger remake, and then the Super Metroid remake. I mean, those are like the things at the forefront of my mind that I'm like, I am really excited for those. Like, it keeps that sort of like youthful energy in me to be excited about them, and it's things that I've had that like upgraded versions of things that I've liked in the past, not necessarily new stuff. Because I can't really think of like something new that I'm really excited for. I mean, there's a handful of things, but not to that level though, right? And again, remakes and remasters, I think, kind of pander to someone like me, right? That I'm kind of starting to get set in my ways. I still like video games and all, but I'm not really wanting to chase like the latest and greatest, just because sometimes it just gets a little bit too much, right? But if you give me a remake or a remaster, something I really like, and if you do it really well, hey, you're my friend, right? We're cool. So we'll see how that goes. And so that got me pretty excited, right? That those three things there are. I mean, the Legend of Zelda remake, that seems to be like pretty much 99% confirmed, right? Super Metroid and Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger, I mean, it seems more or less like it is, right? Given that last little leak that we had, right, from that discussion that was being going on between the investors. I mean, it seems like it's a thing. So I'm going to give that one. And again, I say this my own speculation without any industry insider information or anything like that, outside of what you just, what you can yourself can find on YouTube. I'm going to give that one about an 80%. The Super Metroid remake, I'm going to give that one about a 75%. Still pretty high, right? But still, where I'm not 100% sure. But the Legend of Zelda remake, though, that seems to be a thing. So that is pretty exciting there.
Let's get into it now here with some statistics and events that happened in the year of 2014 in video game history. We're getting a little bit closer to our modern times. And again, like I mentioned before, this is sort of I remember as I'm looking at the list here of a lot of the games that came out and things that happened, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I remember, but it's not immediately at the forefront of my mind when I think about video games. But there was still some pretty cool stuff, though, that happened. And so let's start getting into it here. So the year 2014 saw a number of events in the video game industry. No new major consoles were released, but updates and upgrades were. The new Nintendo 3DS was released in Japan and Oceania, and Sony Interactive Entertainment released the new model 2000 PS Vita systems in Europe and North America. In video game related corporate acquisitions, Amazon purchased the online video game streaming service Twitch, and Facebook acquired the virtual reality company and product Oculus. Nintendo released Amiibo in 2014, companion figurines that could be scanned by the 3DS and Wii U systems. On Twitter and other internet social media, and Gamergate controversy began. So we're going to go into a little bit of the Gamergate, as I actually don't know a whole lot about it. I know that it kind of, I guess, technically has been continuing on, sort of, and the whole thing is kind of dumb, but I think it's still worth talking about to an extent, just because of the effect that like social media has, and really specifically with the video game industry, right? It seems to be sort of like a target for it, but we'll go over that here in a bit. But let's see. But among video games originally released in 2014, critics gave the highest reviews to Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U, Dark Souls 2, Bayonetta 2, Shovel Knight, Velocity 2X, Dragon Age Inquisition, Mario Kart 8, and Hearthstone Heroes of Warcraft. Other significant games that won awards include Destiny, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, Monument Valley, Grand Theft Auto Online, Call of Duty: Advanced Warfare, and Watch Dogs. Several new installments in 2014 include Assassin's Creed, Bayonetta, Borderlands 2, Call of Duty, Castlevania, Civilization, Dark Souls, Divinity, Donkey Kong, Dragon Age, The Elder Scrolls, Elite, Far Cry, Final Fantasy, Forza Horizon, Infamous, Kinect Sports, Kirby, Little Big Planet, Mario Kart, Metal Gear, MX vs. ATV, Ninja Gaiden, Persona, Pokemon, Professor Layton, Shantae, Sniper Elite, Sonic the Hedgehog, Strider Hero, Super Smash Bros., Tales, The Sims, Thief, Trials, Tropico, Wolfenstein, and World of Warcraft. In addition, 2014 saw the introduction of several new properties, including Destiny, Five Nights at Freddy's, Shovel Knight, Sunset Overdrive, Titanfall, The Evil Within, and Watch Dogs. highest grossing game. So let's see. So this is revenue wise. So this again includes physical sales, digital purchases, subscriptions, microtransactions, free to play, and pay to play across all platforms, including PC, mobile, and console. So number one was Puzzles and Dungeons with a revenue of 1,500,000,000, and that's a free to play game. Number two was Crossfire at 1,400,000,000, another free to play game. Number three, Candy Crush Saga, 1,333,000,000, another free to play game. Number four was Clash of Clans, 1 billion, another free to play game. Number five was League of Legends at 946 million, another free to play game. Dungeon Fighter Online at 891 million, another free to play game. Call of Duty Advanced Warfare at 840 million. Grand Theft Auto 5 at 750 million. World of Warcraft at 728 million, and Destiny at 500 million. So the top games on there, as you can see, are just simple free-to-play games. Critically, the top-rated games on this looks like was Grand Theft Auto 5 and The Last of Us Remastered. So those games did come out last year, but these are ports that came out on the modern systems at the time on the Xbox One and PS4 for Grand Theft Auto 5, and then The Last of Us Remastered on the PlayStation 4. But yeah, so as you can see, right, there's definitely kind of a shift happening in the video game industry, like I mentioned before, right, with a lot of these free-to-play games. Game of the Year was sort of split between Dragon Age Inquisition, Destiny, and Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, and to an extent, Dark Souls 2. My personal favorite Game of the Year, I think I'm going to, because again, it was a bit of a quiet year, as far as for, I don't know, like really monumental games. This is where the Game Awards, the official Game Awards started, right? Which we know as of today. And the Game of the Year was Dragon Age Inquisition. That might be my favorite game if I've played it all the way through, but I haven't messed around with it too much. But the game that I did really get into, though, was Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. So I'm going to say that's probably my favorite game that came out this year. Let's see. Let's go back up, though, here, and actually, no. We'll go back onto that Gamergate thing here in a bit. But let's go over events here that happened. So January, Atari emerges from bankruptcy and plans to enter the social casino market. January 6th, 2K Games discontinued the MLB 2K series. January 7th, PlayStation Now, a cloud streaming from Sony Computer Entertainment was announced. January 15th to the 16th, so Steam Dev Days held in Seattle, Washington. January 27th, Microsoft acquired the Gears of War franchise from Epic Games. February 5th, Double Helix was acquired by Amazon.com. February 18th, Irrational Games, the creator of BioShock series, was shut down. March 12th, the 10th British Academy Award Video Game Awards was held in Tobacco Dock, London. That's a cool name. March 17th through the 21st, the Game Developers Conference 2014 was held in San Francisco, California. March 8th, the Project Morpheus, a virtual reality initiative from Sony Computer Entertainment for the Sony PlayStation 4 is announced. March 25th, Oculus VR was acquired by Facebook for $2 billion. I thought that was a little bit later, but no, I guess it happened in 2014. March 28th to the 30th, Res 2014 was held in NEC Birmingham. April 11th to the 13th, PAX East 2014 was held at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. April 12th to the 13th, Midwest Gaming Classic 2014 was held at the Sheraton Milwaukee Brookfield Hotel in Brookfield, Wisconsin. May 20th, Nintendo discontinues the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection servers for Wii and Nintendo DS games. So we're starting to see the shutdown of some online servers, right, for some consoles, which again kind of leads to what we've been talking about before, right? The concern with having games online, because eventually, it's already been done before in the past, right? Well, they'll shut these servers down, right, on some of these consoles. But let's see. So May 29th, Electronic Arts shuts down Mythic Entertainment. June 5th, Nintendo announces their president, Satoru Iwata, won't attend E3 due to medical issues. Yeah, so he started getting pretty sick here. He was like I said, I wasn't really involved with Nintendo at this stretch here. It wasn't until later, right, that been catching up on some their games during the stretch here. And so along with that, I've been hearing about the Satoru Iwata president that was for Nintendo at the time. And it sounds like he was really beloved, but unfortunately, it looks like he ended up getting sick here pretty early on. And he eventually passed, which I think is next year. But yeah, it seemed like he was missed though a lot, as I guess people really enjoyed the way he handled the business. But June 10th to the 12th, E3 2014 was held at the Los Angeles Convention Center. June 12th, Nordic Games acquired the publishing label of THQ. June 14th to the 17th, a DreamHack Summer held in Jönköping, Sweden. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But June 25th, Google released the Google Cardboard, a VR accessory designed for smartphones. Oh, I didn't know that. June 30th, Crytek's IP Homefront, The Revolution, was acquired by I'm assuming Koch Media. Jesus Christ. KOCH Media. Crytek UK, formerly Free Radical Design, and Crytek USA was shut down. Also on June 30th, Deep Silver set up a new subsidiary known as Deep Silver Dam Buster. June 30th also, Electronic Arts shuts down more than 50 multiplayer games. Wow. So we were starting to act some of those games already back then. July 10th, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater creator Neversoft was merged into Infinity Ward by Activision. July 17th through the 20th, QuakeCon 2014, the massive annual LAN party was held in Dallas, Texas. July 24th through the 27th, SDCC 2014 held at the San Diego Convention Center. July 29th, the NVIDIA Shield tablet was released in North America. And then just in July, Airtight Games was shut down approximately 1 month after release of Murdered Soul Suspect. On August 7th, Activision revived the brand of Sierra Entertainment. August 11th, Electronic Arts launched a subscription video game service called EA Access for the Xbox One. August 13th through the 17th, Gamescom 2014 is held in Cologne, Germany. August 20th through the 22nd, Unite 2014 is held in Seattle, Washington. August 25th, Twitch was acquired by Amazon for $970 million. August 28th, the Gamergate controversy came to public attention due to the introduction of the Gamergate hashtag. Okay, we'll touch base on that again here in a bit. August 29th, Nintendo announced the new Nintendo 3DS XL. August 29th through September 1st, PAX Prime 2014 is held at Washington State Convention Center. September 18th through the 21st, Tokyo Game Show 2014 is held at the Makihori Messe in Tokyo. September 25th through the 28th, EGX London 2014 is held in Earl's Court, London. September 27th, Naughty Dog celebrated its 30th anniversary. October 2nd through the 5th, GigaCon 2014 is held in Telenor Arena, Oslo, Norway. October 3rd, EGS 2014 is held in Centro Banamex, Mexico City in Mexico. October 6th, Ubisoft Reflections, formerly known as Reflections Interactive, celebrated its 30th anniversary. October 11th through the 12th, Play Expo 2014 is held at Event City, Manchester. October 11th through the 12th also, First Look 2014 is held in Jaarbeurs in Utrecht, the Netherlands. October 19th, 2014, the League of Legends Champion was held at Seoul World Cup Stadium. October 24th, the 32nd Golden Joysticks Award was held. October 24th through the 26th, Milan Games Week held at, Fiera Milano City in Milan, Italy. I don't know if I pronounced that right. October 31st through November 2nd, PAX Australia 2014 was held in Melbourne Exhibition Centre in Melbourne, Australia. November 6th, Microsoft acquired Minecraft developer Mojang for $2.5 billion. You know, it's interesting because Microsoft gets a lot of shit, right, for their Xbox, and, you know, in a lot of ways, rightly so. But they're still making a gang buck of money, though, on some of the stuff that they've acquired, like just Minecraft alone, they're making a killing on that. How that hurts or how much that benefits their bottom line and all, considering all the other fumbles that they've had, I don't know for sure. I just know that they're just, if we're just looking at that alone, right, that's a lot of money that they're making off of that. So that acquisition there, I'm sure, has benefited them, quite a bit. But November 7th through the 8th, BlizzCon 2014 was held in Anaheim Convention Center in Anaheim. November 12th through the 17th, Esports World Championship 2014 was held in Baku, Azerbaijan. November 27th through the 30th, DreamHack Winter held in Jönköping, Sweden. December 4th, 2K Games announced a new subsidiary called Hangar 13. December 5th, the Game Awards 2014 is held in Las Vegas. And December 6th through the 7th, the PlayStation Experience is held at the Venetian Las Vegas in Las Vegas, Nevada. Hey, a lot of stuff there. Let's see. So some notable deaths. January 23rd, Justin Carmichael, 42, retro game enthusiast known online as Jew Wario, passed. February 14th, the great Harold Ramis. He was 69 years old, actor, writer, director, and who created the Ghostbusters franchise and co-wrote the 2009 video game. Of course, he was also Egon on Ghostbusters. So he passed. February 19th, Bob Hoskins was 71. He was an actor who played Mario in 1993 Super Mario Brothers. He also played in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's actually where I know more him from. But he passed. April 8th, The Ultimate Warrior, age 54, pro wrestler who appeared in numerous WWE games, passed. So The Ultimate Warrior, God, he was 54. He wasn't that old, but I had a small stretch where I was into wrestling, but I mean, I don't know, I was like maybe like around like 6 through like 8 or 9 years old. It was a small stretch that I was into wrestling. It was me and a buddy, we were into it, and his favorite wrestler was Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, and mine was The Ultimate Warrior. So that's why I have a bit of nostalgia for that. And so, yeah, he passed pretty young. But August 11th, Robin Williams, the great Robin Williams, this is a big loss. Age 63, actor who appeared in the ads for The Legend of Zelda alongside his daughter, whose name originates from the series also. So for those that didn't know, he named his daughter after The Legend of Zelda. And of course, Robin Williams in numerous hilarious movies and stand-ups and everything. He was truly a comedic genius, and he is certainly missed. December 6th, Ralph H. Baer, 92. So he lived a long life, but he is the game creator or the game designer credited for creating the first video game home console. So he lived a long life. December 22nd, Christine Cavanaugh, 51, voice actress, best known for the voice of Chucky in the Rugrats franchise. So she passed. So rest in peace to all of them. Hardware releases, so let's see. So again, these are some systems that came out during the stretch here. So nothing new, but just more like consoles that came out in certain regions or revisions of them. So PlayStation 4 came out in February 22nd in Japan. So again, now we're kind of going in reverse, right? And now where the American markets are becoming the more preferred markets, right, to release your consoles in, even if it's a company from Japan. But the Xbox One wouldn't see a release in Japan until September 4th. And then Xbox One came out in China on September 29th. October 11th, so there was a new Nintendo 3DS in Japan, along with a new Nintendo 3DS XL. November 21st, those came out in Australia. Let's see. So yeah, so a lot of events though. That was a lot there. But let's get into this whole Gamergate controversy thing there. So actually, so I can kind of educate myself a little bit on it, as I just know that more of the more recent stuff that has been happening with this, right? But let's get into this here. And this is unfortunately, I think, just part of the negative parts of social media, right? As far as I know, but let's get into it here. So this is going to be probably a bit controversial for some people, right? Just so I'm just kind of reading off of the information here. I'm giving my take on it. Either way, regardless of what you feel on this and all, I think we can all or should agree, right, that any kind of like online bullying or anything is wrong, right? If you're doing it just for the sake of like one thing is to a debate, right? Where you're trying to prove a point, if you strongly feel about it. The other thing, though, is where you're just lashing out at a group of people for whatever reason, right? And all just out of spite because maybe, I don't know, for whatever reason you're doing that, right? If you, that's just wrong, right? Regardless of your take. But anyway, so the Gamergate or Gamergate GG was loosely a loosely organized misogynistic online harassment campaign motivated by a right-wing backlash against feminism, diversity, and progressivism in video game culture. It was conducted using the hashtag Gamergate primarily in 2014 and 2015. Gamergate targeted women in in the video game industry, most notably female feminist media critic Anita Sarkeesian and video game developers Zoe Quinn and Brianna Wu. Gamergate began in an August 2014 blog entry called The Zoe Post by Quinn's ex-boyfriend, which falsely insinuated that Quinn had received a favorable review because of Quinn's sexual relationship with the game's journalist. The blog post spread to 4chan, where many users had previously disparaged Quinn's work. This led to a campaign of harassment against Quinn, coordinated through anonymous message boards such as 4chan, 8chan, and Reddit. The harassment campaign extended to target Sarkeesian, Wu, and others who defended Quinn, and included doxing, rape threats, and death threats. Wow. Gamergate proponents, Gamergaters, claim to be promoting ethics in video game journalism and protecting the gamer identity in opposition to political correctness and the perceived influence of feminism and so-called social justice warriors on video game culture. Proponents allege that there is a conspiracy between journalists and video game developers to focus on progressive social issues such as gender equality and sexism. Such claims have been widely dismissed as trivial, baseless, or unrelated to actual issues of ethics in gaming and journalism. Several commenters in the media and the mass media dismissed the ethics complaints as a deliberate cover for the ongoing harassment of Quinn and other women. Gators frequently denied such any harassment took place, falsely claiming it to be manufactured by the victims. Gamergate has been described as a culture war over cultural diversification, artistic recognition, feminism in video games, social criticism in video games, and the social identity of gamers. Supporters stated that it was a social movement. However, as a movement, Gamergate has no clearly defined goals, coherent messages, or official leaders, making it difficult to define. Gamergate led figures both inside and outside the gaming industry to focus on methods of addressing online harassment, ways to minimize harm, and prevent similar events. Gamergate has been viewed as contributing to the alt-right, and other alt-right movements. So that's kind of the gist of it there. So this was in 2014, right? And what's interesting is that, if you go in, I mean, it's kind of hard to go through this stuff, right? And not just because of everything that it alludes to and all, but like with a lot of the stuff that's been coming out with like the Epstein files and all, is that potentially a lot of these like online forum groups and all were started because of ties or connections that Epstein had with certain individuals, right? And all to create rooms like this is kind of my understanding of it. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but ultimately, when it comes to this, right, and all, I mean, obviously, online, anything that is online, like social media, especially everything, has become like a breeding ground for harassment and things like that, right? It's just kind of the thing that, it unfortunately brings out the worst in people. And I think a lot of it just has to do because you're behind a keyboard and you can't talk shit, basically, to someone face to face. So it gives people a certain comfortable level, right, to make a lot of accusations, claims, be a complete bully and such, right? Just kind of looking at it, as generally as I can, right, with this kind of stuff, is that, first of all, like I said before, right, any kind of like online bullying and everything is wrong. If someone is doing something that is really against, you feel really threatened by, there's ways to sort of communicate that across where it doesn't need to lead to bullying and such. However, though, I will say that, because I kind of noticed this a little bit later on, and there did seem to be this sort of like push to sort of have certain things forced into a game that maybe didn't necessarily need to, right? Like a lot of gender swapping in video games for certain characters or race swapping and all. Now, ultimately, I am all for diversity and inclusion, right? As far as for representation in any kind of medium. So, for example, me as a Hispanic, right, and all, yes, I would love to see more Hispanic related content out there, whether if it's like a main character and all, right? But I'm not too keen on, like, when you were doing race swapping, for example. Like, I don't want to, like, I feel like, because for me, that sort of takes away from the storytelling that can be told that is unique unto a certain race, right? So, for example, if you're making, like, I don't know, Batman, Hispanic, right? That to me takes a lot away from that character, and I don't need him to be Hispanic for me to identify with that character. But I would love to see like a more superhero that is originally Hispanic, right? For example, right? And that goes for like pretty much anything, right? Whether if it's female representation or LGBTQ. I'm sorry for getting those words wrong. Representation and all is like, I'm more for like showing original content instead of replacing what's already there, if that makes any sense. Because again, I think when you're replacing something, you're kind of taking away a bit of the what that story was all about, right? But let's hear your story, right? Let's do original stories like that. And I know that can turn into a whole other conversation as far as like if that would even be successful and all, right? But that's just sort of my opinion, what I would hope for, right? But when it gets to the point, though, of this kind of bullying and everything that has happened online, unfortunately, that's another thing too. And so then one doesn't believe the other, right? And all, as far as where there is some sort of a point to what their argument is, and unfortunately it just spills out to very toxic arguments online, right? And debates and threats and all, right? Where it gets pretty graphic and pretty violent too. And so unfortunately those things after a while need to start being taken serious, right? Because unfortunately nobody can have a more civilized, nuanced discussion about these things. And so, because this kind of continued on, right? Like 2 years ago or so, right? And ultimately kind of in the sort of political environment that we're in now here in the United States anyways. And like I said, I know that there can be kind of controversial to a lot of people and all, but I think it still comes down to that some people have felt threatened because of certain representation that is coming out there. And while I don't agree with forced representation, I still feel that everyone should have the opportunity, right, to have some kind of representation out there. How that representation is shown, that's where, again, you can have a conversation about that, right? So like I just said, right, and all, I wouldn't want to see like me, for example, right, I wouldn't want to see like more Latino characters replacing what's already out there. I wouldn't want to see that, but I would want to see more original stories, right? And that's, I guess, kind of where there should be a conversation on that, I believe, but not to the extent where it got to apparently how we got with Gamergate, right? And that's just kind of unfortunate that it happened. And like I said, it continued on here. What was it, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago or so, right? Where it got kind of bad on that kind of stuff again. And so when I get to that point there, maybe we'll touch base a bit on it as well too. But just remember, everyone, be nice to each other, be kind. Just because someone disagrees with you and all doesn't mean you have to go out and threaten them or anything like that, right? It's just not worth it for you, and it's certainly not worth it for them as well too, just to try to prove a point that maybe you might not even strongly believe, and maybe it's just something that you're echoing, right, from somewhere, or something that you heard elsewhere, right? Just, stop, take a moment, right? Think about what you're saying and what effect that can have on other people as well too. Because at the end of the day, does it really matter, right, for you to discuss in this anger, right, and all, for, again, something that you might not really, at the end of, where you in the end might not really be ready to die on that hill, so to speak. But anyway, that's just kind of my old fatherly advice on all that there. But yeah, it's unfortunately that, this kind of stuff, and of course this stuff is all over online, right? The video game industry, though, or I should say like video game players and all, and video game communities and all, tend to be very toxic when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? And that's from everything from like when we're talking about like diversity, progressive, and inclusion in video games, or even just like your opinion on a video game, right? Like, certain fan bases are just heavily toxic, and it's just, it's like when I was a kid, I remember that we always wanted to have more communities, right, and all to talk about video games, because otherwise you only had maybe a very small handful of people, right, and all that you can communicate that with. Like I know when I was growing up as a kid, I mean, again, obviously there wasn't like any online forums like there was now, and this would have been in the mid '80s and even in the '90s. But I had just a handful of friends. I think I had like maybe growing up, like maybe 3 friends that I could talk to about video games, and even just to an extent. And so there was a sort of a craving, right, and all that. I was like, God, I wish I could talk to somebody about video games, right? Just talk to people about video games. Well, online, when online came about, and then chat rooms and whatnot and forums, well, that made it possible, which was cool. But it certainly opened up the floodgates, right, and all to just how toxic we can be. And for some reason, the video game industry or video game communities and all are just over flooded with this kind of stuff. And it just truly makes it frustrating to try to just participate in any kind of a conversation that has to do with video games, just because it's eventually going to get very toxic, very, what's the word, volatile, very just disgusting, actually. And and again, a lot of it just has to do because people, for some reason, just feel the need to, lash out behind the keyboard, right? And it's a little frightening because it kind of shows like what's really inside people's minds and hearts, where maybe on the outside, right, people will otherwise talk more normally or more civilized. So, but that's a whole, again, right, discussion that it's not really what my channel's about, and I'm not really, smart enough to talk about more like the effects of social media and things like that. Other than just to say that I truly feel like it's hurt society in a lot of ways, and this is, for example, like a sort of like a result of that, right, with everything that happened with Gamergate here. But yeah, just wanted to add a little bit of a insight on that there, and we will probably get a little bit more into it right when in later years as to how this sort of continued on. But let's get now though into the actual games. And so as I was looking through the list here, there's definitely games that I played on here and some that I've actually quite enjoyed, and then also but there's also a lot that I'm not familiar with. I mean, I'm familiar with them. It's just I never really put much time into them, if at all. And so again, like I've said before, right, this is where I'm starting to get into a bit of a blind spot when it comes to video games. I mean, I would say like in the later years, there has been, I feel like, more games that I've been playing, I guess, to an extent. But this stretch here, though, like in the mid 2010s or so, is where I feel like I fell off a bit. But I'll give as much information as I can, though, on these here. And so we're going to start off with the handhelds, and didn't have a whole lot here to cover, but did want to at least briefly mention these. And so there was, for the Nintendo 3DS, there was Bravely Default, which is a turn-based kind of RPG that has you changing like between job classes and all. And I've played a bit of it and all, and it does seem fun. And everything that I played about it definitely kind of harkens back to the old Squaresoft days. And while the story isn't anything too involving, but it's not bad for sure. And the gameplay definitely is where it's at on this one, if you like just, traditional JRPGs. And one that I definitely wouldn't mind putting some more time into if I get the chance, as what I played of it and all, it definitely seems fun. There is a new remastered version that came out on the Switch too, but from what I played on the 3DS version, I think I'd be probably fine enough with that one there. There was also a Yoshi's New Island game, which I'm not too familiar, I guess, with this one. I'm going to assume it's like a platformer of some sort, but not 100% sure. And then for the PlayStation Vita, so there was this Gravity Crush Ultra game that came out on it. I know that Gravity Rush, or I guess Gravity Crush, they were fairly popular games, and I'm not really sure what they're about. But I've heard a lot of good things about them, so maybe at some point I'll try to play them. I think there was like a remastered version that came out on the PlayStation 4, if I recall. But I know that they've gotten a lot of good accolades on them, so maybe I'll try to check it out at some point. But getting into the multi-platform games, though, and so I'm going to start off with this indie game that came out. And so originally, I think it came out wasn't on the PC and then on the PlayStation 4. Because I know it came out later on the Switch, but regardless of I know it was on the PlayStation 4, and I think it came out this year. But that's for this game called Dust: An Elysian Tale. And I really enjoyed the art style to this game. It's definitely kind of like the 2D game that I wish I could have seen back in the day, and it's very clean looking. The controls are pretty well done. It's kind of like a Metroidvania, but kind of not also. And so that's where while I do enjoy the game, it doesn't quite reach the high levels of like some other indie Metroidvania games, just because again, I feel like some of the Metroidvania elements are a bit weak in it, but the action is pretty cool though, and it has a fun enough story into it, like a very fantasy based and all. It's just it is a bit talky though. There's a lot of dialogue in it, and again, the story is decent in it. It's just sometimes you just kind of want to get in there and just start playing the game. But it has some missions in it and side quests and all that'll keep you involved. And like I said, the graphics are really outstanding in this game. So if you want a decent action 2D platformer with some Metroidvania elements to it, and also RPG and adventure elements, I think this is one that you will enjoy if you don't mind just having a bunch of furries talk to you for a while. That sounds wrong. But another game too also that came out on multi-platform, and this was for the Xbox 360 and the PS3, so not on the newer generation systems, but it was for Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. And I started thinking about it. I was like, I don't think I talked about the first Lords of Shadow game, which I'm going to assume that game came out like about 2 to 3 years prior, so I must have missed talking about that one. But Lords of Shadow, the first one, was pretty good. It was so it was published by Konami, but it was developed by Mercury Steam, who they're now known for doing like the Metroid Dread games. But this the first Castlevania Lord of Shadow, it wasn't bad. It was heavily inspired by God of War and also to an extent like Lord of the Rings, and so a bit of a departure there from what we've known Castlevania to be. But I think it worked out pretty well though this time, as Konami's usually struggled to get a 3D Castlevania that was pretty decent. I didn't mind Castlevania Lament of Innocence, but the other ones have been a bit kind of bland actually, and so this one I felt was I think it did the series pretty good. As again, I really my main complaint was Castlevania Lords of Shadow was that it was only running at a chuggy 30 frames per second, and I say that because usually in a God of War like game, right, it really helps to run it at 60 frames per second. I've gotten it on my Steam Deck now, and since then, you can play it at 60 frames per second there. But originally, I played this game on the PlayStation 3, and I remember the frame rate was a bit of a nuisance on it. But it's still not bad, though. It definitely has some epic moments on it. It kind of feels like Castlevania, though, but kind of not. And I guess that's one sort of dock on it, right? Because, you kind of still want a game to feel like a Castlevania game. But it's still pretty cool, though, for what it did. And I actually kind of enjoyed the story on this one. And the gameplay elements and all were pretty fun overall. Yeah, definitely one that I would recommend the first one. The second one I haven't played, but I haven't heard the best things about it, though. Although I know that I think you can either play as Alucard or he has a role in it to some extent. And so I don't know. I mean, it's one of those games that I remember it came out with some pretty bad reviews at first, but then I have heard that from other people. It's like, it's not that bad, but I don't know. I might try to play it at some point just to see what it's all about. But I can definitely recommend the first one, though. I think that one's pretty good, though. But we also got Strider, and so this game came out on all the systems pretty much, like the PS3, Xbox 360, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and I think the PC, I think. But it's sort of like a reboot of the series, I guess, and this is a Metroidvania game, so it was developed by Double Helix, I believe, and Capcom, and well, not bad. I mean, it certainly plays pretty good. Like Strider plays, his controls are really smooth. His attacks are really well done. The level layouts, though, I felt is where the game was a bit lacking, as I did get quite a ways into this one. I remember I beat several bosses, and I felt like I played it for a while, but then I just kind of dropped off of it just because it just wasn't really hooking me. I didn't think like the exploration Metroidvania rewards, that you get from like exploring the map wasn't quite there to the fullest extent from what I appreciate from this genre. But maybe it's one that I'll go back to at some point, and maybe I can appreciate it with a new, fresh perspective now that I'm a bit older. And but so it's not a bad game for sure. Just one that I don't know, I felt was a little unmemorable, which is unfortunate just because I love the original Strider game so much. But we also got for another multi-platform game, and so this is on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, and that was for Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13. So the third game in this trilogy, and the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy, Again, I don't know much about this one other than I think it sort of has an element of like Majora's Mask where there's like a countdown of some sort and you have to beat the game by a certain time, something to that effect. I'm not 100% sure, but obviously Lightning is the main character in this one. But what I have heard, it seems like it's one of the best. It's like I think people tend to appreciate this one more than or Final Fantasy 13 too. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's just, I think I've seen that spoken about here. But either way, both of these sequels to Final Fantasy 13 seem to be beloved enough that there has been a call, right, to get these games remastered. As I think originally I said I'm not too interested in playing them, but now that I think about it, I think that one of the things that they really did really well with this one and part two also was that the gameplay was further improved on, and that was one thing that I didn't appreciate with the Final Fantasy 13 with the battle system. So if it is even better than Final Fantasy 13, then that does kind of have my attention, right? But not something I'm really rushing out to play. But anyway, so Lightning Returns did come out this year, though. But then we got two games from Telltale Games. And so this is the developer that did The Walking Dead Season 1 that we talked about, I think 2 episodes back. And so they got us The Walking Dead Season 2 this time. And this one I did beat as well, too. And you're basically continuing on the story of Clementine in this one. And it's pretty good. I mean, it's really well done. It's has pretty much the same sort of like graphical style gameplay where you're making choices, a bit of a point and click game, a little bit of a walking simulator, and it's I mean the story is really well done on it, really well acted, and it's definitely worth continuing on her journey on this one. It wasn't quite as impactful as the first season, but I feel like if you did like the first season and wanted to kind of see more of it, you'll definitely be treated with a really good story in this one, right? And that's the thing about this game is that it's more story intensive, right, than gameplay. So, but if you're interested in Walking or Telltale games, then you already kind of know that, right? And so I would assume that if you have any interest in it, you don't mind that there. But yeah, I would say, like I said, definitely worth playing. I think that, like I said, it was a good continuance from the first season. But the other game that they brought out too also was The Wolf Among Us. Now these games, like I said, the episodes were being dispersed out every month or two or so, and so they didn't all come out at once. And so same thing with the other the one that they did, A Wolf Among Us. So this game you play as sort of I guess he's pretty much like the big bad wolf, right? So because what it is, it's sort of like all these fairy tales that are so like the Three Little Pigs, Snow White, is that one of them? A bunch of different fairy tales, right? And they all sort of come together, kind of think like also like things like Hansel and Gretel, I believe, and the Little Red Riding Hood, and things like that. Only the setting though is in this really sort of like gritty detective kind of story, and so you play a good, like I think it's like the big bad wolf that you play in it, right? Only he's more in his human form most of the time, and he's just like this really grizzled detective trying to solve a mystery. It's very unique. It uses the same graphical style, like cel shaded, it almost looks like a graphic novel come to life, and I love the art style to it, and it's really creative. I mean, the story to it and all I actually really dug. I thought it was a really good time with this one, and highly recommend to play it if you're a fan of games like The Walking Dead, only one with a completely unique story to it, as it's very dramatic. Some of the detective elements in it and all are really cool, and yeah, this is actually one that I wouldn't mind seeing some kind of a sequel to. And yeah, it's a cool game. I played it back in the day, like roughly, I think when this one was coming out, I played it like shortly afterwards, so having played it for like over a decade now, but I do remember I did enjoy my time with this one here. But another game that came out, and so we're going to start seeing multi-platform games now, right? They started coming out on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. And so one of them that was being hyped up quite a bit at the time was the Watch Dogs. And that's because the trailer that I think is Ubisoft that published this, what they put out was something that was looking really incredible. So it's like this open world game where you have the ability to like hack all kinds of things around you, from everything from like street lights to ATM machines and all kinds of stuff. And so the graphics on it were looking pretty impressive on it. And but ultimately when the game actually came out, I never played this one, but I didn't necessarily get like horrible reviews. It's just that I think that it was a bit of a letdown, as it wasn't quite as impressive with what they were originally showing, but it seems to have some fan out there of this game. And again, one that I mean, I think it's cool in concept and all, and one that I probably might enjoy, because I think I did play a demo of it. I have like a memory of playing it somehow. It must have been maybe a demo that I played or something like that, but not something that really, like I said, I'd be rushing out to play again, as it's, it seems like it's another fairly lengthy open world game and all, and you only have so much time for those there. But I mean, the concept seems interesting for sure, and so I have a feeling like if I were to try it and really get into it, I wouldn't mind it too much. But there's just so much of them out there nowadays, and I'm already 12 years late to the party on this one. And it's just not something that I'm, jumping up, get into. But was definitely one of the more hyped up games early on in this generation that unfortunately didn't just quite meet complete expectations of what people had for it. But another game that we got, though, and this one came out on the PlayStation 4. Well, first on PC in last year, actually, in 2013. And then it came out on the PlayStation 4. And I think maybe on the Xbox One, I believe. I'm not sure. But it was Outlast. And so this is, again, an early on game that I played, here in the PlayStation 4 generation. And I got to say that I played it for a little bit, and this game is fucked up. Like, this game is very scary. And while I generally like those kind of games and all, I just never got around to playing it. And now I would, with kids and all, it's something I would have to play pretty late at night. And I don't want my kids walking out and seeing some of the messed up stuff that happens in this game. But yeah, it does have my interest, though, to play it at some point. This is in its sequel, which came out some years later. And yeah, I mean, a little bit that I played of it, I'm like, oh wow, this game, I can see why it's considered to be one of the scariest games of all time. And basically, it's what it is. It's the concept. You're some kind of a journalist, I believe. And so you go into like this, it's like a hospital, I believe, that's been abandoned, and you're trying to solve some kind of a mystery there. You don't have a weapon or anything. All you have is just like a light and your notepad, right? So a lot of the game is very stealthy. It's trying to run away from the enemy and all, and that's what, and hide from them. And that's what kind of really amps up the fear factor, right? Let alone that what you're encountering are really horrific beings, I guess, monsters or whatever. But not only that, but you can't really fight back, right? Like in Resident Evil game, yeah, sure, it's scary, but at least you get some firepower, right, to fight back. Not in this one. And I think that's part of what really makes this game scary. So I love the concept of it. I do want to play this game at some point. Maybe just like, I don't know, with the lights turned on and perhaps maybe in handheld mode, so I'm not, staring at a big old screen at something jumping out and screaming, scaring me to death. But yeah, it's cool though. If you like scary games, I would highly recommend you check that one out, because little bit that I played of it is pretty amazing. Let's see, and so then we also got Destiny, and so Destiny is it's one of those. I don't think it's free to play, but it's one of those online shooting games. And honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Destiny other than that it was developed by Bungie, and I know it's huge, right? Well, it was huge at the time, and it's it's a game that really kind of started setting the groundwork, right, for these kind of games where, I'm trying to look up a little bit of information on it so I can try to actually sound like I know what I'm talking about. Because for as popular as this game is, I'm just not too familiar with it, though. So let's see, if you bear with me for just a sec here. Okay, here we go. Destiny. So, and the reason I wanted to talk a little bit about this game, because I know, like I said, I'm not into these kind of games. It's not just what I like playing and all, but I do understand that this game was pretty important, right, for the video game industry at the time when it came out, for better or worse, right? And all, like I said, I'm not a fan of these games. I do feel like these games have kind of led us on the path where we're at now, but I can't also deny, right, that there's been millions of people that have enjoyed a lot of time playing these games, right? And so that is part of video game history there. So regardless of my opinion on it, I feel like it definitely needs some acknowledgement. So I'm just going to read a bit about here, right? So to give a bit of information on this. So Destiny is an online first-person shooter video game developed by Bungie. So they were the ones that were responsible for the Halo 1, 2, and 3, and Halo Reach also, which is considered like the golden age of the Halo games. It was released worldwide on September 9th, 2014 for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, and Xbox One consoles. Destiny marked Bungie's first new console franchise since the Halo series, and it was the first game in a 10-year agreement between Bungie and Activision. Set in a mythological science fiction world, the game features a multiplayer shared world environment with elements of role-playing games. Activities in Destiny are divided amongst player versus environment and player versus player. Game types. In addition to normal story missions, player PvE features 3-player strikes and 6-player raids. A free roam patrol mode is available for each destination, which features public events. PvP features objective-based modes as well as traditional deathmatch game modes. So let's see. So that's a bit of information on it. Let's see, but the game was originally published by Activision, though Bungie now self-publishes the game after separating from Activision in 2019. Upon its release, Destiny received generally positive reviews, with praise for its gameplay, graphics, and for maintaining lineage from the Halo franchise, particularly in regards to competitive experiences. Criticism centered mostly around the game's storyline, post-campaign content, and emphasis on grinding. It sold over US $325 million at retail in its first 5 days, making it the biggest new franchise launch of all time. So, okay, all right. Yeah, because I was like, I remember it was big. I just didn't know, I guess it was that big, but it is often cited as a pioneer of the live service genre. It was Game Radar's 2014 Game of the Year, and it received BAFTA Award for Best Game at 2014 British Academy Video Game Awards. And then its sequel was later released in 2017, which I'm sure we'll get into that later there. But yeah, so just wanted to read a little bit on that. Again, like I said, it was highly important for really, making these kind of games truly popular. And I know that they're kind of dying out. I know that sometimes they get a bad rep and all, but at the time they weren't really completely normal. And so I can only imagine, right, for people that enjoy playing competitive games like this was probably a really fun place to play. So that's cool. That this game existed, because I remember people playing this game quite a bit during this stretch here, and so it seems unfortunate, right, that they just sort of let it die out some afterwards. But again, that's another conversation as far as like the lasting appeal of these kind of games. But let's see. A little tidbit on this. So I see here, so the player's companion Ghost was initially voiced by Peter Dinklage, but was replaced by Nolan North, starting with the Taken Keen, which I believe is a DLC for it, because I know there was a bunch of like DLCs and stuff to it. But yeah, pretty cool though overall, though, I guess, for what it was, right? But jumping on though to another game. So continuing on with the multi-platform game. So there was The Evil Within. And so this game also came out like on the previous gen, 7th gen, right, with PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, I believe, but then came out also on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. I played it on the PlayStation 4. It was one of the early games that I got on the PlayStation 4. And while the graphics are okay, I mean, it does kind of chug along a bit. This is another really messed up game. But I love it for that. I believe it's from Shinji Mikami. Am I getting that right? But it's kind of like a grindhouse horror kind of game. I mean, the game is truly messed up. I mean, just the first part of the game, after this little introduction sequence, right, where just kind of how you start off. I mean, it's pretty gruesome, gritty, and definitely scary, right? I mean, it's not a game you want to play around with your kids. I mean, there's blood and gore and all kinds of messed up stuff in it. And it was a very difficult game too, also. But once I kind of got the groove of the game, I actually got really hooked on this one, and then did end up beating it. And I really enjoyed my time with it. It's kind of a combination of like Resident Evil meets Silent Hill, kind of the best of both worlds, really. And I mean, I would just say if you like horror games, definitely I think you'll appreciate this one. Again, it is a bit of a challenge, but that kind of what amps up the horror factor to it, right? And you play this detective, and you go to like to this hospital or mental asylum, or I'm not sure at the beginning, and then pretty quickly on things get all messed up. And so again, the gameplay, you have some weapons, right? So you can fight back in this one, unlike Outlast, but you're limited on ammo, limited on resources, and some of the enemies that you see on this are pretty horrific. I mean, there's like these butcher, like crazy looking monster looking things, and then also there's another enemy that has like a like a safe for a head. It's all kind of weird, but very, like I said, the backgrounds and all are truly frightening. Yeah, I love it for that. So yeah, if you like these kind of games, definitely a cool game to play during Halloween season, I would say. But we got the second part of Dark Souls this year too, Dark Souls 2. Again, I'm not super familiar with these games, but I know from my understanding is that Dark Souls was really beloved. Dark Souls 2 seems to be a bit of the black sheep of the family when it comes to these kind of games. And I mean, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think for some places, right, and all they even considered it like the game of the year. It's just that for what Dark Souls was, and then eventually what the later games of this kind would come out, you know, when people look back on it, it seems to be one of the less liked ones. But overall, though, it doesn't seem too bad. I don't know too much about the series again, so I guess I don't have a whole lot to say, but it is another Dark Souls game that came out, and that's got to be worth something. We also had Far Cry 4, and so again, I'm not really too familiar with the Far Cry games. I know this one, the main villain, I believe, was voiced by Troy Baker, and he seemed to be a bit charismatic, kind of like in Far Cry 3. And so, which actually, did I talk about Far Cry 3? That would have come out a few years back. Not sure. But anyways, yeah, Far Cry 4 came out this year and seems to be kind of more of the same. I think this is where the series started getting a little bit stale for some people as well, too, which is kind of a running theme with a lot of Ubisoft games. But I think for the most part, people still liked it, right? It's just I think the formula was starting to wear a bit thin. And so for me, like, I mean, I never really went through that stretch of playing all these Ubisoft games. So if I were to play something like this, I probably actually wouldn't mind it, right? Because I'm not completely burnt out on those kind of games yet. But also at the same time, just not something I'm running to play. But from what it sounds like, I mean, it seems like a pretty good kind of like open worldish kind of first person shooter is sort of my understanding of these games. But one game that I did play and beat, though, is, again, this is still a stretch that I was trying to play and beat all the Call of Duty games, and that was for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. And so I was pretty impressed with the graphics on this one, right? It was the first Call of Duty that I played on this generation that was built for this generation. Where like the previous year, Call of Duty Ghost, that was still pretty cool for what it was, but it was sort of still felt a bit like, you know, the DNA from last generation. Where this one, there was a lot of cool, like, I guess, visual flair, right? And all that made it seem like, okay, yeah, this is a 8th gen game. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it's certainly not a bad game. And I mean, it's sort of set in a more futuristic like setting. So not quite like completely futuristic, but also not, you know, there are like technology in the game and all that was more advanced than what you would see like in the modern warfare games, which made it pretty, you know, pretty cool change up for that. Is this the one with Kevin Spacey in it? I think. I don't know. Troy Baker, I do know, voices the main character in it. And yeah, I mean, pretty cool for what it is, right? I mean, it's typical Call of Duty stuff, but it's, you know, like I said, I was enjoying these games for their single player campaign at that time. I know there was like this cool effect, like in the first stage where like these drones are swarming around, right? And I thought that was a pretty cool effect that I was like, okay, yeah, this feels like next gen. And yeah, you know, it's a fun thrill ride, right, for what it was. But we got another Assassin's Creed game this year for Assassin's Creed Unity. This is the first game in Assassin's Creed that was built for the 8th generation. And this game was unfortunately infamous for having kind of a botched launch to it, where there was a lot of glitches to the game. There's kind of an infamous meme that was going around for a while where it shows like you're in a dialogue scene talking to someone, but really all you can see is just their eyeballs and teeth and mouth floating, which looks pretty frightening. But it just kind of goes to show like a lot of the glitches that this game had. But the game takes place in France, and so it has a unique setting for that. It takes place sometimes, I think, like, I don't know, 1700s, maybe 1800s. I'm not 100% sure. But I mean, it seems interesting. And if anything, this game has been patched a lot. And now it actually seems to be a very worthwhile game in the series. I know fairly recently, like it got a boost in for 60 frames per second. And I think it's taking advantage of some of the PS5 Pro features too. So like I said, fairly recently it's been patched to improve it even further. So at launch, it probably was a bit of a disappointment for some people. Afterwards, in the years that followed, right, especially like if you go and play it now, I think there's probably a lot to appreciate about this game. Again, this is where I've already fallen off of the series, so I haven't played this. I did boot it up one time because I just wanted to see what it was all about. And But yeah, other than that, though, I don't have too much information on it other than just that bit there. But it seems like people really enjoy it now, though. But next up, though, is for Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zero. And so this is interesting because for this game here, it was actually really the first game that I was like, okay, this is next generation, right? Like there's always been that one game where it was like, okay, yeah, this is the next generation. And to some extent, it was Battlefield 4 that came out last year because it was one of the launch titles, and it looked pretty impressive at the time. But I felt like this is the first experience that I had where I was like, okay, all right, we're in the 8th generation now. This is actually pretty kick-ass. Again, we're starting to reach the point of diminishing returns where the jump from 7th to 8 wasn't quite as big as previous generations, but it was still there, though. And so Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zero, so I was highly anticipating this game, obviously, right? From my, if you've been listening to anything I've been saying up to this point, I've been a big fan of the series. And so this is the next installment on it, but they're going a different approach on this one. And so it was using what they called the Fox engine back then, which can make some really nice graphics and running at 60 frames per second. And but the project apparently that they were trying to do for Metal Gear Solid 5 overall was pretty ambitious and big, that what they ended up doing was splitting it up into two. And so this year we got the first part of it. And so again, Ground Zeroes. And so I mean, it wasn't a full price game. I think I could be wrong, but I think it launched at $20. But it's almost like a glorified demo because there's one area that you get to play in, and so you're on a mission to save someone. But it was kind of showing you what this game was going to be all about and what the full game was going to be also, where it was just like this big old sandbox that you can play, but with stealth gameplay. And that made it really exciting, right? Because up to this point, I've really enjoyed the Metal Gear Solid 4 or the Metal Gear Solid games because of their gameplay, like the stealth gameplay, but they tended to be a bit linear and very story focused. Where this one, they were opening it up a lot more, where now you get this big old area to play in. And so that really increased the amount of stealth elements that you can have in this one, or how you can sneak around, take out the enemy, or avoid the enemy. And so definitely gave it a sort of like a choose your own adventure style of gameplay, where you are out there, you're given minimal information, and then it's up to you to try to figure out how to get by. And so just like this in this game here, Ground Zeroes, so again, the mission is to try to save someone. How you go about that, there's a lot of different ways you can do that, and that's what made it a lot of fun. So it made it even a lot of fun to go back and play it, because once you beat it the first time, you're like, oh, wait a minute, what if I did this? And then you go back and play it, and you're like, oh yeah, that works also. And so not only was it cool for this demo here, but it was also cool for what the full product was going to be, right? Which they were already calling it the Metal Gear Solid 5, the Phantom Pain. And so it was definitely worth checking out. And like I said, the graphics on this really impressed me, and the gameplay as well too was really well done. And while it was light on story, I think though that I was already like, I think I can appreciate this game for what it was. Again, the gameplay were right. But a few things on it though so Hideo Kojima, well, we'll get more into it next year as far as what happened with him in this game, but there was some controversy also behind the scenes as far as like the voice acting talent. And so for the genius that he is, he also seems to be someone that, from what I've read anyways and seen videos on, to be a bit difficult to work with. And so because of that, some of the voice talent that he had used before, right, he ultimately weren't able to come back, like for example David Hayter. And so because he got replaced by the Hollywood actor Kiefer Sutherland. Now, I love Kiefer Sutherland. I think he's a great actor, and there's a lot of movies that I've liked him in, right, before in the past. But David Hayter was Snake, though, and so again, there seems to be some drama because basically it seems like Hideo Kojima has like this fangirl obsession with like Hollywood talent, and so it looks like he's always wanted Hollywood talent in his games. But even though he was starting to become a very prolific video game creator, it still wasn't like on the level of like say where he could acquire Hollywood talent, at least initially until around this time. And so now he was able to secure some of that talent, and so which came at the cost of burning some actors from that had worked with him for a while, predominantly David Hayter. From what that's my understanding of it anyways. I know that David Hayter's kind of come out saying like almost like, hey, you know what, it is what it is, no harm, no foul, but we're just not actually on speaking terms or something to that extent. Again, I could have some of my facts wrong there. I just know that there was a bit of bad blood there, right? And it's unfortunate because when you hear Snake in this one, I mean, Kiefer Sutherland has a very distinct voice also, right? Just his natural voice, and actually goes well with Snake. But the bad thing, though, was on this, and I actually would have been open to it, is just that, and we're going to get more into this in the full game next year, but even in this demo here, you can already tell that, yeah, sure, he sounds good as Snake, right? I still prefer David Hayter's voice, but it's definitely not a bad replacement. It's just that because this game focuses a lot more on gameplay, which again, as far as the overall game itself is concerned, is not bad, but as far as the story goes and all in his voice performance, it's just limited because there's just not a whole lot there. But either way, though, right? This is for a glorified demo, I guess you can say. It was pretty cool. How this demo ends definitely showed what like the PlayStation 4 could do, right? And like I said, it was one of the most jaw-dropping moments I've seen in video games, right? That again made me say like, okay, this is the next generation. And so definitely left me, because it ends like on a sizzle reel trailer of what the Phantom Pain was going to be, and so definitely got me hyped to, in anticipation for the full game that would come out next year. And so we'll get more into that then. But this is definitely a cool way to start off experience in this game for sure. But another game that came out multi-platform this year, and so this was Game of the Year at the Game of the Year Awards, the very first one, and so it was for Dragon Age Inquisition. And so it's from BioWare, and so I've enjoyed the Dragon Age game, the Origins one. Dragon Age 2, from my understanding, wasn't that great, but this one seemed to be a bit returned to form, and so the bit that I played of it, it definitely feels more like Dragon Age Origins, and something that I feel like I could really get into, but just haven't really sat down and put the time into it, because it seems like a really beefy, lengthy game. But it was Game of the Year for a reason, so I would assume that it's, pretty good overall. RPG kind of games, right, and all tend to be the Game of the Year contenders at the least. So it's no surprise that this one won, especially considering that it was not a bad year, like I said, right, and all, but a bit of a slower year. But yeah, I can see why this one won. But actually, I'm a little bit surprised too, also, because I know the impact that Destiny had was pretty big too. But again, games of this kind generally seem to be the more favored for Game of the Year, though. But the game that was my personal game of the year, and amongst one of the more favorite games of this year, was Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. And so this game, Troy Baker's in this one too, because Troy Baker was also in Metal Gear. Well, he comes out in Metal Gear Solid 5, but I don't think he was in Ground Zeroes, was he? I forgot, but basically, so he plays a role in Ground Zeroes. Also, he was also in Call of Duty: Advanced Warfare. He was also in Far Cry 4, and he was also the main character, at least who's voicing him, and also kind of his likeness in Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. And so this game, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, I highly recommend this game. The story takes place many years before the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And so you play the main character. You play Troy Baker, whatever his name is in the game. And so ultimately, it's like this open world game. And it uses the Nemesis system. And I'm probably bad at trying to describe what this Nemesis system is. We talked a little bit about it earlier when we were talking about like patents and such, but basically it's as you're playing this game, right? So it's open world, and so inhabiting these open worlds are like all these orcs and orc commanders and all. And so these orc commanders have like their own personalities, names, attributes, and whatnot. And so let's say you're going through this open world and you come across an encampment of these orcs, and whether if it's by a mission or you just stumble upon it, and let's just say you kill one of the orcs, like their commander, and he happens to be one of the ones part of this Nemesis system. So if you kill it, and he's part of your target, then you get like certain rewards for it. But if he kills you, so let's say like you kill one of the orcs, right? And then so what happens is that another orc steps in its place, and you get like this cool menu screen that shows you all this. Another orc steps into his place, and now that orc becomes commander of that area, I believe, and that orc could be even stronger, right? And more attributes and whatnot. Or if an orc kills you, if one of those commanders kills you, then that orc powers up even more, and he's going to be even harder next time. Something to that effect, right? Again, I'm horrible at probably trying to explain it, but I just know that it was really innovative. It's a really cool system that, as far as I know, the system was only used in this one and then in one of its later sequels, and then that's it. as far as I know, right? But it was patent though, and that it's kind of like nobody else can really use that system anymore, from what it sounds like. Which again, we already talked about that before. But it was really cool though in this game. It's I remember I was really addicted to this game because again, that Nemesis system just made it so much fun to play. And I mean, I'll tell you, one of the biggest rushes in gaming is being able to storm an orc camp. What you're trying to at first stealth your way through it, right? And then all of a sudden you get caught though, and now you have all these orcs around you, you're combating them, and then eventually you kill their commander and all, and it's so much fun. It's kind of like you're making up your own story as you go on this, because the story is a bit limited on it and all. I mean, what's there is pretty cool, but it's really the adventure, the gameplay and all that you're going through this, because the melee combat in it is really well done too also, where it's I mean, the overall gameplay structure, it's kind of a combination between like Batman Arkham, the Arkham games, where like the way you counter, it's pretty cool by the press of a triangle button or the Y button on the Xbox. And also a bit like Assassin's Creed, just the way you can scale walls and buildings and such. And truly an awesome game. I really enjoyed this one. And actually, I'm getting the inkling to try to play this game again, as I just had a lot of fun with it back then. Looks pretty good overall. And I mean, I want to say it like... when you look at it, I mean, because it came out on the 7th gen as well too, also, and I mean, it runs at 30 frames per second, but it's for the most part pretty detailed and has some pretty cool effects, like the rain effects at the beginning of the game look pretty incredible, and yeah, just an amazing game, and yeah, I mean, it's just I would say if you like Lord of the Rings open world games, this is definitely for me one of the better ones out there. It's truly incredible. But let's jump over to the Wii U, though. So we had some games that did. I would say that this is probably one of the better years for the Wii U, as we had games like a lot of these games ended up getting ported over to the Switch. So again, as far as like, that's what I'm saying. When it comes to the Wii U, its exclusivity is a bit limited, just because. Or, I mean, I'm sorry, like the reason to get it because of its exclusives is a bit limited, just because so much of this stuff ended up coming out to the Switch. And not only that, better versions of it. But we had Shovel Knight that came out this year, which was a indie game that was done in the style of like a retro Nintendo games. I mean, you look at the game and it looks like a Nintendo game, like the original Nintendo. And as part of its charm, though, I played a bit of this one, and it's cool. I do enjoy this game, and it's a game that I really want to get into more. But it came out first on the Wii U and also on the 3DS, and this year eventually got ported to pretty much everything else. But and it had a lot of expansions on it down the years, right? But this is where it first started. I would say if you're into, excuse me, like retro style indie games, it's definitely one of the better ones. I mean, it's the one that I usually see pop up more on favorite indie games of all time, and one that you should definitely give a go. But we had this Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric game that came out this year. I don't know much about it other than that I know that it was pretty heavily panned. We're entering a stretch of Sonic games that just weren't that good from what I understand. A lot of them I didn't even know existed, like this one here. I didn't know it existed until not too long ago. I was like, oh, there was a Sonic Boom game? Oh, okay. I could be wrong, but I think that there was also like a Sonic show that was coming around the same time, and it was sort of based around that. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's kind of the feeling that I get. But yeah, it was a Sonic game, pretty forgettable from what I understand, which is unfortunate, right? Just because the series just seemed to be on a bit of a downward slope at this time. But one game, though, that was pretty cool, and it was a Wii U exclusive at this time, was which was cool because it was a different kind of game than your typical Nintendo game, but it was a Bayonetta 2. So Bayonetta came out the first one a few years ago. I'm pretty sure we talked about it, and it's like a cool game in the style of like Devil May Cry. Fast action, cool combination of like gunplay and melee attacks also, with some crazy demonic powers, or in this case, witch powers. And the first one was really cool, a really fun lead character with Bayonetta, and just overall, just a really fun game. Well, the first one was. I beat that one, and I thought that was cool. I haven't really touched part 2, and so I want to get into this game here, and because it seems like a lot of fun. And again, it was exclusive on the Wii U at this time. It was running at 60 frames per second, cool action, a bit of a mature game, right? And so again, definitely something that the Wii U I feel really needed. And so eventually the game would get ported over to other systems, but at the time it was exclusive to this one here. I can't think of anything that it used creatively on the gamepad, right? But I'm sure maybe there was features here and there, but nothing that really stood out too much though. But just the game itself that was overall really fun from what it sounds like, and definitely one that I do want to start playing at some point soon. As again, I've beaten the first one, haven't beaten this one though, so I'd be curious to jump into this one and start playing it. But we had Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and a little bit that I played of this game. It's fun. It is a fun game. I remember there's like certain like little mini levels of this. I believe in Super Mario 3D World, and so those are kind of fun. So that kind of expands on it. Was making a whole game based around that, where basically you're Toad and you're just trying to solve some puzzles in a sort of isometric view, and it seems like a fun little puzzle game. I want to say that my wife, I think, bought it on her Switch, because again, this is a game that I'm pretty sure it got ported over to the Switch, and she seems to enjoy it. And so yeah, I mean, it's definitely like, if you like puzzle solving games and all, it's cute, it's fun, right, and all, but definitely gets your noggin thinking, right. And so, but has that sort of addictive quality of like being a fun little puzzle game, right? That's not super complex, easy enough to get into, but still gets your brain thinking. So those games are always fun. Then we also got Hyrule Warriors. I've never gotten into the series. I just know that it's obviously based around Zelda, and it sort of plays like those Dynasty games, where Dynasty, is that what they're called? Where it's basically you're just attacking a whole horde of enemies, and they're a bit of button masher games, which, honestly, they're a bit kind of tedious to play after a while, at least the ones that I've played. But I think this one, because it has the Zelda name in it, right, and all, and the characters and all, this one actually might be kind of interesting on playing. So I don't know, maybe sometime I'll give it a shot. But because I know there's been like other Hyrule Warrior games that came out later on, and some of them seem to explore more of the stories of some of the Zelda games. So this one, I'm not quite sure if it's just sort of its own standalone game, or if it's based around one of the other Zelda games. But this is where this one came out though. But then we also had Super Smash Bros. 3DS and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So both of these were pretty big for their systems, and just more Smash Brother goodness. That sounds wrong, but Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, at least I know on the Wii U, would become huge eventually, right? It was pretty big on the Wii U, but then with all the roster of characters that it launched with, or that it had with, but then when it got moved over to the Switch, it just had a whole roster of characters, right? And all that. Really, I look at like Smash Brothers, not so much like it is a fun fighting game. It's a fun party game. It's definitely one of the best for that kind of style, but it's also like a celebration of video game history, because you have everyone from like obviously the Nintendo characters like Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, Toad, Samus, Link, Zelda, Ganon, Bowser, and then also like other odd, from a lot of like the Fire Emblem games, Star Fox, Game & Watch is even in there, Mr. Robo. But then you also get characters from like, Simon Belmont, to like Kazuya from Tekken, Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter, to the hero from Dragon Quest XI, to even fucking Cloud and Sephiroth, right, and Snake. And so that is pretty cool overall, right, for that. So that's why I always look at this game sort of like a celebration of video game history. And this is where it started, right? I think, I believe that a lot of people might think, casual video game fans and all, that it started on the Switch, but no, the base of this game started on the Wii U. It's just that it got expanded more on the Switch. But yeah, even, like I said, even without the downloadable content, all the characters that this game launched with and all, or that were available on the Wii U, is pretty impressive still. And yeah, just a fun fighting game. And Super Smash Bros. Is a big hit, right? One of the biggest games for Nintendo's had. So I'm sure you know about this game. But yeah, this is where it started though, on the Wii U. Not a bad place to play it, right? It's just that, again, it was a bit limited because, support eventually ended on this one and got carried over to the Switch one. But yeah, the game itself, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, is amazing, and just truly, like I said, right, it's just awesome how many like levels and characters and all they were able to get from all kinds of different franchises, and so that's pretty cool there. The one on the 3DS, I played it a little bit, and it has a pretty big roster of characters. This one has kind of like a cel-shaded look to it. I've just played it a little bit, so I'm not too familiar with it, but seems like a pretty cool way to play Super Smash Bros. Game on the go. And this was again before we could do like, play it on the Switch basically. So, But yeah, but cool games there. But another game that we got though this year too that was huge on the Wii U and eventually became even more huge on the Switch, but was Mario Kart 8. And again, this was where it started on this one here. Again, it got expanded on later with DLC and characters and all that the Switch got. But you know, the Nintendo Wii U though, it's basically the same game, just not with all the additions on it. So at the time, yeah, I mean, this was a pretty popular game on the Wii U. I'm gonna take a shot in the dark and assume that this is probably the best selling game on there. But because I think it's the best selling one on the Switch, I believe. And so, you know, it's Mario Kart 8. I mean, they're fun games. I mean, it has like the gravity mode in it where your car kind of turns into a hovercraft in certain sections of the course, which I think was introduced in Mario Kart 7, but still pretty fun though in this one. I mean, this one for me didn't really change up the formula really in any big meaningful way that I'm aware of, but it's still fun though. It's a game that we did play quite a bit here as a family, and I mean, the one on the Switch anyways, but yeah, I mean, it's Mario Kart. It's great. It's fun. It looks great, and it was definitely cool seeing this series in high definition. And yeah, overall, just a game that kept getting expanded on more and was the Mario Kart game for quite a while, because we didn't get an actual new Mario Kart game until 2025. So this game was about 11 years. Yeah, 11 years or so, right until we got a new Mario Kart game. So yeah, this is a staple for many kart racing games in many households for a little over a decade, until we got the new one that came out fairly recently. And even then, right, that one's had some controversy behind it as well too. So seems like it's still, in many cases, I feel like the more preferred game in this series. But let's jump over to the Xbox One now. So this had a few exclusives on it that I feel are worth talking about here. And so we got Sunset Overdrive. I don't know much about this game other than I'm pretty sure it was developed by Insomniac Games, which, you know, they've been more for PlayStation. It seems to be some kind of a shooter, like it has a kind of like a fun art style to it. But yeah, other than that, I don't know too much more about it. When I see the screenshots of it and all, sometimes it seems to remind me a bit of like Jet Grind Radio. But yeah, don't know much more about it. But I just remember that was one thing that stood out for me, was that it was developed by Insomniac Games. So I'm like, oh shit, they're going third party now. Eventually, Sony would buy Insomniac Games, and I think we'll probably get into that maybe here in the next few years to come. But looks like they were still at liberty to develop a game for the Xbox, and so that's what they got. Never played it, so I don't know much about it, but it seemed to be fairly well beloved from what I can understand. But one game, though, that I thought was pretty interesting, though, on the Xbox, at least the concept of it, was this game called Titanfall. And so in this game, it was an online game, and so I don't think it really had like a single player campaign on it. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. But yeah, you control like these big old mechs on it in a first person shooter style. And the gameplay and all seemed to be pretty well liked. It was a bit limited again because it was only multiplayer. So I remember it getting criticized for that back in the day. But it would eventually lead though to one of my favorite first-person shooter games of all time. But again, but that's a sequel that comes out in later years. But for what it was though in this one, it was pretty cool for people that like that kind of game, and seemed to be one of the more notable Xbox One exclusives. As again, there wasn't a whole lot during the stretch here, but this was one that sort of stood out. But we did get a Forza Horizon game. So again, this is the one that's a bit more open world instead of just being like just a racing simulator. And so Forza Horizon 2, this one takes place in the southern France and northern Italy areas. And yeah, I mean, it seems like this sub-series was catching on. And so, yeah, that was a good thing. I mean, you know, like I said, because we didn't have things like Gotham or Project Gotham Racing anymore, that sort of bridged that gap between racing simulation and arcade racing games. So I can imagine I would have probably had a lot of fun with this one had I played it back then. It wasn't until part 3 that I started getting into the series. No, I think it was part 4 actually. Yeah, because it was Horizon 4 and Horizon. Yeah, it was actually Forza Horizon 4 is the one that I started getting into. My bad. But yeah, I mean, I can see why this series started getting some popularity, because again, I didn't jump into it until later on. But I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is kind of my kind of racing game here, and so I think I've mentioned before, but I'm looking forward to part 6, which should be pretty cool, and right around the corner actually too. But Xbox One, though, so it didn't launch with a Halo game, but it did get a Halo Master Chief Collection this year. And this ends up being one of my favorite, like, video game compilations of all time, like remasters of games and all. And so, because what this is that it's taking, so it started off with, it was like basically remastering or remaking Halo, Combat Evolved, Halo 2, Halo 3, and then eventually Halo Reach would get added to the picture on this, and then also Halo 4, and then Halo ODST, I believe. So you had this whole compilation of games, right? I don't think they all launched all at once, right? I think because I think Halo Reach came out after the fact, but basically it's like the best play to play these games. It truly an outstanding package, and it was like, I mean, so Halo Combat Evolved did get like a remaster of it on the 360, where it improved the graphics on it. This one here, though, now bumps it up to 60 frames per second. Halo 2 got pretty much this remaster treatment also, where the graphics were improved on, running at 60 frames per second now as well, with some new added cinemas as well, too. Halo 3 got a bump up to 60 frames per second as well, too. And then eventually same thing with Halo Reach and Halo 4. And so really an outstanding way to play these games, right? The best Halo games all in one package. So it was definitely much needed for the Xbox, right? Because this is at the time still, right? Halo was still sort of Xbox's baby. And so it's kind of cool that they got this treatment here, because, yeah, these Halo games were pretty amazing. And so this is the best way to play them. Well, I should say eventually became the best way to play them. I could be wrong on this, but I think like the single player campaign and all, right, for the games that came out on it first. And again, I think it was the original trilogy that came out first. I think Halo Reach and Halo 4 were later added to this compilation, I think. But the multiplayer, though, it was kind of unfortunately notorious, though, that it launched kind of broken. Where there was a lot of bugs and a lot of things. It just had a lot of issues. Eventually, from what I understand, a lot of that got patched, but was a bit of a bummer, right, that it started launching in that state, which would kind of become a pattern going forward, right, and all, with a lot of these, especially like multiplayer games and all, right, that kind of launched broken and all, and or just really gaming in general, right? This is sort of where it started, and would become a bit of a nuisance, right, going forward, as I'm sure I'll talk about more games that were broken, at launch. But eventually, like I said, it became a really cool package. I love having this downloaded on my Xbox, so, if I want to just go in there and play some Halo. And yeah, just you get, I mean, in my opinion, right, and all the best versions of these games. And so definitely, if you own an Xbox, it's definitely a worthwhile game to get, for sure. But then let's jump over to the PlayStation 4, as we got some exclusives there. And so there was a racing game that was really hyped up quite a bit, as it was originally supposed to be, I believe, a launch title for the PlayStation 4, but it didn't come out until later, in this year. And that was for Drive Club. And so this game was kind of supposed to be like a racing simulator / kind of a little bit arcadey, but was supposedly going to have like these really incredible graphics on it. And it was developed by Evolution Studios, who they've made the MotorStorm games that I've talked about before in the past. And so those were like those kind of like off-road racing games, where in the first one you're like in a desert area or desert canyon area. Then the third one you're kind of more in a tropical setting. And so those games were amazing. This game, though, is more, wheels on the pavement kind of racing game, and you get a decent selection of cars. The graphics were pretty impressive on it. It had a lot of cool effects. I don't think it was running at 60 frames per second, though, but it still looked pretty cool. And it was a fun racing game, but it was just kind of noted that it was delayed a lot, and it didn't quite meet the promise of what this game was being hyped up to be. This is another game, though, that I think it ended up getting patched more and improved on as the time went on, but ultimately, just because it was a bit of a letdown, I could be wrong, but I think it didn't quite meet like all sales expectations and all that. But it's still a fun racing game, and if you're wanting just to play another racing game, right, that's not completely 100% like just a racing simulator, that it's I think this would be a good one to check out. Little Big Planet 3 also came out this year, and I don't know much about this one, actually, because I know like part 2 expanded more on it, right, where you can do like create a lot of levels, right, and all that weren't just platformers. There were, you can also do like shooting kind of levels and whatnot. but Little Big Planet 3, I'm pretty sure it's more of the same, right? Where you can create your levels and all. I don't know much about this one though. So yeah, that's don't have a whole lot on that one, but it did come out this year. I'm gonna say though that I'm pretty sure the servers on this one are probably shut down as well too. If they are, like I said, there are also some fan servers that people have maintained, right, where you can still continue playing them, at least from what I've read online somewhere. But one game that I did get quite a bit into, though, this year was for Infamous Second Son. And so this game here, I actually played it quite a bit. And this is during a stretch where there wasn't a whole lot to play. So I did, between this and Middle Earth, Shadow of Mordor were the games that I played quite a bit. Again, I was just wanting to play more games in this generation, but there wasn't a whole lot to play. So because you can play good and bad in these games, right? Just like in the previous ones. And so this one here, I pretty much almost 100%ed it on the good side. I haven't gone back and played it like on the bad, being a bad guy. But it's a pretty fun game. It's kind of more of the same from like the previous Infamous games, only now, obviously the graphics look better, and it takes place in Seattle, which I thought was an interesting setting just because that's more within my backyard, right? As far as like, settings and all. So I thought it was kind of cool to see like a city structure around something that I'm more familiar with. And you played Desmond Miles? No, Desmond Miles. Fuck, what am I thinking about? That's Assassin's Creed. I forgot the main character's name, but it's done also by Troy Baker. So here's another game he's in, and it's a pretty cool game. It's again, I don't quite like it as much as the first one, but it's pretty cool overall. Though you get a cool like chain attack that you can do, and your powers are based around fire this time mostly. And while the story is it's decent, it's not anything too crazy though, but it's not bad though. But the gameplay is where it's at. It was just hella fun playing this game, just going all over Seattle and just taking out the bad guys and completing the missions and all. And it made for a pretty addictive gameplay loop. And yeah, it wasn't, like I said, as far as this series goes, as far as this genre goes, it wasn't completely, innovative, but it was a lot of fun though for what it was. And I had a lot of fun with it. Infamous Second Son, pretty cool game overall, and one of the better PlayStation 4 exclusives, at least up to this point here. But then just wanted to talk a bit about Final Fantasy 14. And so for Final Fantasy 14, it's not something that I played again, right? Even though this is my favorite series of all time, but just the online games on this, right? It's just something I didn't really get into. But basically, this is where, let me actually look up some information on this because we talked about it before, right? That it released, but it was a bit of a flop. Well, this is where, let's see, Final Fantasy 14, here we go. But this is where it got its Realm Reborn update on it, and where it really improved the game a lot. So we already talked about it a few episodes back, right? But just to kind of reiterate, so when Final Fantasy 14 came out, it was a bit of a botched launch, right? Where it just didn't do very well. But the Final Fantasy 14 So yeah, it was in 2010 again, right when it came out. We talked about it back then, but then it came out. It got a worldwide release on the PlayStation 3 and PC in 2013, and then in this year came out for the PlayStation 4. And so they really improved on a lot of things, and it ended up becoming listed as really like one of the best games of all time as far as like these kind of games go. As this game is still ongoing, I'm sure it probably had some drop in player count because it's been out for a while. But the director, also Naoki Yoshida, or I believe known also as Yoshi P. So he eventually ended up doing a Final Fantasy 16, but we'll talk more about that later. But he really steered the ship on this one along with his team to get this game right on path, and has become just a moneymaker for Square Enix. And really probably a big reason why they've continued to survive in is because of this game, probably, as this is where it started. It kept getting a bunch of updates, seems to be really beloved by a lot of people. It's so good that I've almost been tempted in jumping into this game, but that you need a subscription and all that just kind of puts me off on it. And again, it's, with these kind of games, it seems like to really get a lot out of it, you have to sort of like live in this world. And it's just not something I'm really wanting to do at this time, just because, again, I I prefer trying to spend my time playing as many games as possible as opposed to just, sticking with one game. But for people that are really fans of these kind of games, though, it really got expanded on and improved a lot on. And really, I mean, for people that are like these kind of games, it probably is their favorite Final Fantasy game. The games that I always see like that are amongst the top of like Final Fantasy games are Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, and Final Fantasy XIV. So that's how good this game is, right? And all that it's for many people considered one of the best Final Fantasy games of all time. But that's what I got for this episode here. And so again, like I said, I don't have too much to speak on this here, as a lot of these games I just didn't have a whole lot of experience with, but at least hopefully that gives you a bit of a list of some games that you can check out if you haven't already. And definitely would be interested if you have any feedback on these games that maybe I didn't cover in full detail, or if you do end up playing them, if you have any thoughts on them. But that's what I got for 2014. Next year, for 2015, I feel was like the big breakout year for the 8th generation, as we started getting a lot of great stuff. I mean, we had, the continuation of Snake's story, right? In the Metal Gear Phantom Pain. We had a really cool Gothic-like Souls-like game, and we also had a game that really changed RPGs and video games with involving a certain Witcher, and just overall a really great year. And there's a lot of games this year that came out as I think about it, right? And this is actually where I did start picking up and playing some more games here, right? So going forward, I'm going to be a little bit more familiar with it. So it must have been like 2012, 13, 14 that I was a bit of a sleep on the wheel as far as like video games goes. But then, I think it was just because there was actually some quality stuff out there, right? And that was actually really interested in playing. And so, yeah, next year is actually really good. I would say that 2015, it's not quite at the top of like some of the best years in gaming, but as far as like the more modern years, I think it's one of the better ones. And there was a lot of great stuff that came out that year, so that'll be pretty exciting to talk about. But that's what I got for this episode here. Hope you have an amazing week, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.